Some events in history were so chilling, experts erased them from textbooks. Entire towns vanished overnight. Ancient artifacts appeared where none should exist. Mysterious deaths defied explanation, and journals hinted at secrets too dangerous to reveal. For decades, scholars argued, hid, and rewrote the past, yet the darkest truths remain unsolved. Rising from the gently rolling chalk downs of Wiltshire, England, stands a structure that appears at first like a natural hill, quiet, grass-covered, almost unremarkable in the soft English landscape. Yet Silbury Hill is anything but natural. At nearly 40 meters high and spanning a vast circular base, it is the largest prehistoric man-made mound in Europe. Its presence is subtle from a distance, but overwhelming in implication once you understand what you are looking at. There are no visible entrances, no obvious chambers, no carvings or inscriptions to explain its purpose. And yet, this enormous mound of chalk, gravel, and clay was constructed by human hands over 4,000 years ago, during the late Neolithic period, around 2400 BC. Thousands of people would have been required, carrying basket after basket of earth, shaping a monument that would slowly rise over generations. But why? Mainstream archaeology offers cautious interpretations. Some suggest it may have been part of a vast ceremonial landscape connected to nearby sacred sites, such as Avebury. Others propose it functioned as a territorial marker, a symbol of power and collective identity rather than a practical structure. Unlike burial mounds found elsewhere in prehistoric Europe, no confirmed human remains have ever been discovered within its core. That absence deepens the uncertainty rather than resolving it. The hill's internal structure has been partially revealed through excavations. In 1776, an early tunnel was driven into its side in search of a hidden burial chamber, but it yielded nothing conclusive. Later, in 1849, another excavation attempted to uncover its secrets, again without success. In modern times, scientific surveys and stabilization work, especially after a partial collapse in 2000, have provided more data about its layered construction. Still, the purpose behind its precise engineering remains elusive. But beyond the academic explanations, Silbury Hill exists within a wider landscape rich in prehistoric mystery. It sits near the Avebury stone circles, part of a complex ritual environment that also includes West Kennet and other ancient earthworks. Some researchers suggest it was not meant to stand alone, but to interact with these surrounding monuments, forming a kind of ceremonial network tied to seasonal cycles, astronomy, or beliefs about the Earth itself. This is where interpretation begins to drift into more speculative territory. Some theories propose that Silbury Hill may have functioned as a giant symbolic representation of the Earth or fertility, its gradual construction mirroring cycles of renewal and life. Others have suggested astronomical alignments, where its position could mark celestial events or seasonal transitions, although definitive proof remains elusive. There are also more unconventional ideas. Folklore once spoke of a buried figure, sometimes a king named Sil, riding a golden horse beneath the mound. While these stories are not supported by archaeological evidence, they reflect a persistent human instinct, the feeling that something significant lies hidden beneath its silent surface. Even today, ground-penetrating studies reveal complex internal layers, but no central chamber, no final answer. What makes Silbury Hill so compelling is not just its size or age, but its restraint. Unlike monuments designed to impress through visible grandeur, it hides its meaning entirely within. It does not reveal itself easily, nor does it offer clear explanations. It simply stands, enduring, enigmatic, and unresolved. And so the question remains, as it has for centuries: was Silbury Hill a monument to the living, the dead, the heavens above, or something we have not yet imagined at all? As the rolling chalk downs of Wiltshire fade from view, our journey shifts across continents to the arid northern coast of Peru, where the landscape is stark and unforgiving. Here, in the arid plains near the Lambayeque region, rises a complex of ancient adobe structures that has confounded archaeologists and captivated historians for decades. Huaca Rajada. Unlike the gently imposing silhouette of Silbury Hill, Huaca Rajada emerges as a sharp contrast. Rectangular mounds of sun-baked mud brick, their edges eroded by centuries of wind and sand, yet stubbornly standing against the passage of time. It is in this harsh desert environment that secrets of the pre-Columbian world were both preserved and buried, waiting for modern eyes to rediscover them. Huaca Rajada, sometimes called the Sacred Pyramid of Sipan, is most famous as the final resting place of a series of Moche rulers who dominated northern Peru between approximately 100 and 800 AD. Yet, despite being a burial site, it is far from typical. When archaeologists first uncovered its treasures in the 1980s, they encountered a discovery that seemed almost too extraordinary to be real. Intact tombs filled with gold, silver, and intricately crafted artifacts, many of which bore the unmistakable symbols of power and ritual. It was a glimpse into a civilization that valued artistry and spirituality in equal measure, yet remained shrouded in mystery. The most famous tomb, that of the Lord of Sipan, revealed a man adorned with elaborate jewelry, including necklaces, earrings, and a headdress of gold and turquoise. Surrounding him were attendants and sacrificial offerings, evidence of a complex social and religious hierarchy. These discoveries transformed our understanding of the Moche culture, previously thought to be less sophisticated than the Inca who came centuries later. The richness of the tombs suggested not only immense wealth, but also deeply entrenched ceremonial practices. But as is often the case with Huaca Rajada, the more we uncover, the more questions arise. For instance, how were these tombs kept secret for so long in a region that has been inhabited for millennia? Natural erosion and periodic floods might have hidden the structures, but there is also evidence suggesting deliberate concealment. Some archaeologists speculate that the Moche may have intended certain tombs to remain hidden, preserving the sanctity of their rulers in ways that modern excavation can only partially understand. This raises a further question. What motivated the meticulous placement of grave goods, the layering of sacrificial victims, and the intricate ritualistic symbols? Was it purely religious, a form of political theater, or something else entirely? Adding to the intrigue is the way the Moche utilized their environment in constructing Huaca Rajada. Adobe bricks were carefully shaped and layered, not merely for structural stability, but potentially to reflect cosmological ideas. Some researchers propose that the mounds were aligned with celestial events or cardinal directions, though evidence remains inconclusive. Others have suggested that the tombs encode symbolic messages, perhaps intended to communicate with deities or even with the spirits of the dead. Such interpretations remain speculative, but they underscore the deliberate complexity of the site. Even within the artifacts themselves, mysteries abound. Many depict scenes of combat, ritual sacrifice, and daily life, but with a level of detail that challenges conventional understanding of pre-Columbian societies. The metallurgical techniques alone, hammering gold, creating elaborate filigree, combining materials like turquoise, copper, and shell, suggest a culture of extraordinary craftsmanship. Yet some designs, particularly those associated with ceremonial headdresses and ritual paraphernalia, remain almost alien in their symbolism. Were these purely decorative, or did they hold hidden meanings known only to the initiated? The discovery of additional tombs in the surrounding area has complicated the narrative further. Some appear intentionally placed to echo or mirror the original Huaca Rajada complex, hinting at a broader ritual landscape yet to be fully mapped. There are hints that certain tombs were aligned with seasonal cycles or agricultural markers, possibly connecting the dead rulers with the life-giving forces of the desert itself. And then there are the rumors, persistent and tantalizing, of looted tombs and undocumented finds, stories whispered by locals and mentioned in scattered reports, suggesting that even today Huaca Rajada may hold treasures we have yet to see. Yet perhaps the most profound mystery is not what can be measured or catalogued, but the human story embedded in the earth. Each layer of adobe, each arrangement of a skeleton or artifact, is a fragment of a world view, a civilization's attempt to bridge life and death, the tangible and the spiritual. How did the Moche understand their own mortality? How did they envision the journey of the soul? And why choose to bury their rulers with such extravagance, only to risk the possibility of natural destruction in the desert sands? In contemplating Huaca Rajada, we are reminded that human ingenuity often intertwines with enigma. The site does not yield its secrets easily, and perhaps it never fully will. The more we study, the more subtle questions emerge. How much of the Moche belief system was encoded in symbols we are incapable of interpreting? Could the site itself represent a form of knowledge, a cosmic map, or a ritual language lost to time? And if so, what might future discoveries reveal, not just about the Moche, but about the universal human impulse to commemorate, to connect, and to seek understanding beyond life itself? Like Silbury Hill, Huaca Rajada stands as a testament to the persistence of mystery across time and space, a place where history and legend meet, where careful scholarship coexists with the unknown, and where the sands of Peru continue to guard their secrets, waiting for those willing to look, wonder, and question. From the sun-scorched deserts of northern Peru, where Huaca Rajada rises in silence beneath shifting sands, our path now turns once again across oceans and centuries. The camera leaves behind adobe and gold and drifts northward, across the Atlantic winds, toward a landscape shaped not by desert heat, but by rain, stone, and sea mist. Here, in the western reaches of Ireland, the land itself seems to breathe under low, heavy clouds. On a broad limestone ridge overlooking the Atlantic coast of County Sligo stands a vast stone mound known as the Cairn of Knocknarea. At first glance, it appears almost like a natural outcrop, an immense, rounded hill crowned with pale stones that have weathered thousands of years of wind and rain. But as you draw closer, the symmetry becomes undeniable. This is not a random formation. This is a structure built by human hands, deliberately shaped, deliberately placed, and deliberately preserved across millennia. The cairn dominates the summit of Knocknarea Mountain, rising over the surrounding landscape like a silent sentinel. It measures tens of meters across and is composed of thousands upon thousands of limestone rocks, carefully stacked without mortar. From a distance, it blends into the sky and stone of the region. But up close, each rock tells a fragment of a forgotten effort. Countless human journeys upward, stone by stone, carried against gravity itself. Archaeological estimates place its construction in the Neolithic period, roughly between 3000 and 2000 BC. That alone raises immediate questions. What kind of society mobilizes the labor required to build such a monument on a mountain summit, without metal tools, without wheels, without modern engineering? And more importantly, why here? Local tradition identifies the cairn as the burial place of Queen Medb, or Medb of Connacht, a powerful figure from Irish mythology. In legend, she is a warrior queen of immense authority, associated with sovereignty, conflict, and ambition. Some versions of the tale suggest she is buried upright within the cairn, facing her enemies across the land she once ruled. But archaeology has yet to confirm any burial chamber beneath the mound. No central tomb has been definitively identified. No remains conclusively linked to such a figure have been recovered. And so the cairn remains silent. Mainstream interpretations suggest that Knocknarea was likely a ceremonial or ritual site, possibly linked to territorial boundaries, ancestor worship, or seasonal gatherings. Its placement is significant. It overlooks ancient pathways, fertile plains, and the distant Atlantic horizon. From this vantage point, the builders would have had a commanding view of both land and sea, two worlds constantly in motion, constantly changing. Was this visibility intentional? Was the cairn meant to mark ownership, presence, or something more abstract? Perhaps a connection between earth and sky. Yet even within these reasonable explanations, gaps remain. Unlike many Neolithic passage tombs in Ireland, Knocknarea shows no visible entrance. No corridor leads inward. No structural opening breaks the continuity of the stone. It is sealed, almost defensive in its completeness. This has led some researchers to suggest that the cairn was never intended to be entered at all. Instead, it may have functioned as a pure monument, an external expression of belief rather than a functional burial space. But then, if no one was meant to enter it, what exactly was being preserved inside? The absence of excavation adds another layer of mystery. Out of respect for its cultural significance and potential instability, the cairn has never been fully excavated. This means its interior remains largely unknown. Beneath the outer layer of stones, there could be chambers, artifacts, or nothing at all, just carefully engineered layers of earth and rock. The uncertainty itself becomes part of the site's identity. It is a monument that refuses to reveal its own truth. Looking across the wider landscape of Sligo, Knocknarea does not stand alone. It is part of a dense prehistoric environment filled with cairns, stone circles, and passage tombs, including the Great Complex at Carrowmore. Some researchers propose that these sites formed a connected ritual network, aligned with celestial events such as solstices or lunar cycles. From the summit of Knocknarea, one might imagine ancient observers tracking the movement of the sun as it rose and fell over the horizon, marking time not with instruments, but with stone and memory. But there are also more speculative interpretations that linger at the edges of academic discussion. Some suggest that Knocknarea's cairn may represent a symbolic axis, a point of contact between the human world and something beyond it, whether that be ancestral realms, natural forces, or cosmological principles no longer fully understood. Others have proposed that its construction encoded social hierarchies or oral histories, preserved not in writing, but in landscape itself. And then there are the questions that resist categorization altogether. Why does the cairn feel so deliberately isolated on the summit? Why was such immense effort devoted to placing stone upon stone in a location exposed to the harshest elements? Was it meant to endure forever, or simply to witness time passing? Even the mythology surrounding Queen Medb raises further ambiguity. Was she a historical figure later mythologized, or a symbolic representation of sovereignty itself? If the cairn is indeed linked to her, does it represent a burial, a memorial, or something more abstract, a statement of power etched into the land? And if no physical remains lie within, what does that absence signify in the context of Neolithic belief systems? As modern archaeology continues to study the surrounding region using non-invasive techniques, ground-penetrating radar, aerial mapping, and environmental analysis, the cairn continues to guard its interior. It offers structure without explanation, presence without disclosure, a monument that speaks only through its silence. Standing atop Knocknarea today, with the Atlantic wind pressing against the stone, it is difficult not to feel the weight of unanswered questions. The cairn does not reveal whether it was built for the dead, the living, or something that no longer fits within either category. It simply endures, shaped by hands long gone, yet still shaping the way we imagine them. And so we are left with a lingering uncertainty. If the cairn of Knocknarea was never meant to be fully understood, what does that say about the people who built it? And what, if anything, might still lie hidden beneath its silent stones? From the windswept heights of Knocknarea, where stone and legend converge above the misty plains of Ireland, our journey now turns far south, across continents and millennia, to the cradle of civilization itself. Here, the rivers carve fertile valleys, the sun blazes over parched earth, and yet beneath the sands lie the foundations of a city that would reshape human history. Uruk, one of the first great urban centers known to humanity. Rising along the banks of the ancient Euphrates, in what is now southern Iraq, Uruk was once the beating heart of Sumer, a city that existed more than 5,000 years ago, around 4000 BC. Today, the ruins stretch across the plain, vast mounds of mud brick and stone that hint at a city of monumental ambition. From a distance, the tell appears modest, gentle hills dotting the horizon, but once bustling streets, sprawling temples, and massive walls once rose here, forming a metropolis that dwarfed contemporary settlements. Uruk's significance is profound. It is widely considered the birthplace of urban civilization, and perhaps the very invention of writing. Cuneiform script first appeared here, etched into clay tablets that recorded trade, law, and ritual. But while scholars have traced the development of administrative systems and monumental architecture, many questions remain unanswered. How did a settlement that began as a cluster of simple mud brick homes grow into a city of tens of thousands? What social, religious, or technological forces drove its unprecedented expansion? The city's most iconic monuments are its temples, dedicated to deities such as Anu and Inanna. The White Temple, perched atop the Anu ziggurat, rises like a crown on the skyline of ancient Uruk. Archaeologists marvel at the precision with which it was constructed, its alignment to cardinal points suggesting sophisticated knowledge of geometry and perhaps even astronomy. But why build on such a grand scale? Was it purely an expression of devotion, or did these monumental constructions serve to reinforce political and social hierarchy, consolidating power in the hands of a priestly elite? Excavations have uncovered residential districts, craft workshops, and storage facilities, revealing a city of remarkable complexity. Clay tablets record transactions, inventories, and even poetic hymns, painting a vivid picture of daily life. Yet, much about Uruk resists interpretation. The motivations behind its sudden urban growth, the reasons for specific architectural choices, and the symbolic language encoded in its temples remain elusive. Some of the most enduring mysteries concern the city's legendary figures, most famously Gilgamesh, king of Uruk according to later epic tales. The historical veracity of Gilgamesh is uncertain. Was he a real ruler, mythologized over generations, or a symbolic embodiment of early Mesopotamian ideals of kingship and heroism? The lines between history and legend blur here, leaving the modern observer to wonder what truth, if any, lies buried beneath the city's ruined walls. Beyond its temples and palaces, Uruk was a hub of innovation. Archaeological evidence suggests advances in irrigation, metallurgy, and trade networks that spanned vast distances. Exotic materials such as lapis lazuli, carnelian, and timber arrived from far-flung regions, hinting at connections that are only partially understood. How did a city of this scale coordinate resources, labor, and knowledge with such efficiency, long before the advent of centralized bureaucracy as we know it? And what drove the population to invest so much effort in monumental construction and record-keeping beyond mere survival? Speculative theories have long surrounded Uruk. Some researchers propose that its sudden rise may have been facilitated by unknown social or religious catalysts, perhaps linked to ritualized practices that consolidated communal identity. Others point to its strategic location near the Euphrates, suggesting that geography alone may have driven urban development. More fringe ideas venture into the symbolic, that Uruk represents the materialization of a collective vision, an early attempt to impose cosmic order on the chaotic world. While these interpretations remain hypothetical, They underscore the allure of a city whose scale and influence challenge easy explanation. The decline of Uruk adds further mystery. By around 3100 BC, parts of the city were abandoned or repurposed, yet it remained inhabited for centuries thereafter. Archaeologists debate the causes: environmental shifts, river course changes, political upheaval. But definitive answers remain elusive. Even more puzzling are the subtle traces of cultural influence the city left across Mesopotamia and beyond. Architectural styles, religious motifs, and administrative practices spread from Uruk to other centers, hinting at a far-reaching impact whose full extent we have yet to map. Walking among the ruins today, one can still sense the ambition of the city's builders. The mud-brick walls, eroded by centuries of wind and rain, hint at streets and neighborhoods that once thrived with human activity. The ziggurats, though partially collapsed, remain impressive in scale, reminding us that Uruk was not merely a settlement, but a statement, a declaration that humans could organize, create, and aspire on an unprecedented scale. And yet, for all that we know, Uruk retains its mysteries. How much of its social structure, its spiritual life, or its urban planning is forever lost to time? Could the city hold secrets about the origins of writing, governance, or religion that have yet to be uncovered? As we peer into the layers of earth and clay, we are confronted with the realization that even one of humanity's earliest metropolises can never be fully understood. Uruk endures as both a historical landmark and an enigma, a testament to human ingenuity, ambition, and the lingering mysteries that continue to challenge our understanding. What truths remain buried beneath its sun-baked mounds, waiting for future generations to decipher? And how much of our own history, like the stones of Uruk, is built upon foundations we are only beginning to glimpse? From the ancient streets and monumental ziggurats of Uruk, our journey now shifts across the Americas to the volcanic plains of El Salvador, where a quiet village once thrived, only to be preserved beneath layers of ash and history. Unlike the towering constructions of Mesopotamia, this site offers intimacy, a glimpse into the daily rhythms of ordinary people, frozen in time in a way almost no other archaeological site can provide. Here lies Joya de Cerén, often called the Pompeii of the Americas, a remarkable Neolithic settlement whose story is written not in stone temples or monumental walls, but in the delicate remains of domestic life. Located near the modern town of Suchitoto, Joya de Cerén was once a small farming community, inhabited around 600 to 700 AD. The village sits quietly on a fertile plain, overlooked by the looming San Salvador volcano, whose slopes have shaped the land for millennia. Yet this ordinary appearance belies the extraordinary preservation that would later astonish archaeologists. In approximately 600 AD, a volcanic eruption blanketed the settlement in layers of ash, freezing the village in a sudden moment of time. Unlike other sites where fire or decay erased details, the ash preserved that moment with almost miraculous precision. Thatched roofs, hearths, tools, and even food crops remained intact, offering a vivid snapshot of pre-Columbian life. Walking through Joya de Cerén today, one is struck not by grandeur, but by intimacy. The walls of homes, partially reconstructed, reveal furniture, cooking areas, and storage bins, each carefully arranged. Corn cobs lie beside grinding stones. Pottery rests where it was last used. Evidence of domestic animals and gardens speaks to daily routines that unfolded centuries ago. The site provides rare insight into the lives of common people, rather than rulers or priestly elites. But even in this familiarity, mystery lingers. How did the village organize itself socially? Were the homes and fields distributed according to family lines, spiritual beliefs, or agricultural necessity? Archaeologists have noted that some structures are larger and more elaborate than others, hinting at hierarchies within the community. Yet without written records, the details remain speculative. The people of Joya de Cerén left no direct account of their social order, no tablets like those of Uruk to describe trade or law. What is known emerges indirectly from the placement of objects, traces of crops, and subtle variations in construction. The eruption itself raises further questions. The ash, while destructive, acted as a preservative. But why did some structures collapse while others remain remarkably intact? Why are certain domestic tools concentrated in one area and not another? Researchers have suggested that variations in ash thickness, wind direction, and roof construction could explain these differences. Yet even with modern geoscience, the precise dynamics of the eruption and its selective preservation continue to intrigue scientists. Could there have been deliberate choices by the inhabitants that influenced how their village was ultimately fossilized in ash? Another element of fascination lies in the agricultural remains. Joya de Cerén's residents cultivated maize, beans, squash, and cacao, meticulously arranged in small plots that indicate an intimate understanding of crop rotation and soil fertility. Some plants, preserved down to seeds and roots, provide a rare opportunity to study ancient diets and agricultural practices. Yet questions remain about how they managed these resources in a region prone to volcanic activity. Did they possess knowledge of the land's volatile nature? Were certain crops chosen for resilience or for ceremonial purposes we cannot fully comprehend? Beyond the domestic sphere, subtle signs hint at ritual and spirituality. Some homes contain small altars or arrangements that suggest offerings to deities or spirits of the land. Tools and artifacts are occasionally placed in positions that seem purposeful, though their exact significance is lost to time. Scholars debate whether these were everyday practices or expressions of a complex spiritual life encoded into the very layout of the village. Could Joya de Cerén's inhabitants have possessed a worldview that linked agricultural success, human labor, and cosmic forces in ways we can only begin to imagine? There is also the matter of connections beyond the village. Artifacts suggest trade and cultural interaction with neighboring communities in Mesoamerica. Obsidian tools, ceramics, and other materials indicate networks that extended beyond immediate settlements. Yet the full scope of these networks and the influence of Joya de Cerén within them remains uncertain. Was the village self-sufficient or part of a larger web of economic, religious, or political relationships? And if so, what role did it play in shaping regional culture? Even in modern study, the site retains an aura of mystery. While many structures have been reconstructed for education and tourism, the ash that preserved them continues to guard secrets beneath its surface. Microscopic analysis reveals traces of food preparation, smoke patterns, and soil composition. Yet each discovery raises new questions about how these people lived, adapted, and interacted with the forces of nature around them. And as with all ancient sites, there is the possibility that elements remain hidden, artifacts, burial sites, or ritual objects yet uncovered, waiting beneath layers of earth for a future generation to unearth them. Joya de Cerén, unlike monumental cities or imposing cairns, teaches us the power of perspective. It reminds us that human history is composed not only of kings and rulers, but also of communities, families, and the ordinary acts that shape daily life. And yet, even in its apparent ordinariness, it invites wonder. How much of the village's social structure, spiritual practice, and knowledge of the natural world is permanently lost to us? Could further excavation reveal insights into resilience, adaptation, or cultural identity that challenge our assumptions about ancient societies? Standing in the quiet spaces of Joya de Cerén, one cannot help but feel a connection to the people who once lived here, people whose lives were interrupted by fire and ash, yet preserved by it. The village endures as both a testament to survival and an enigma, a place where everyday life and the extraordinary intersect, leaving us to ponder what might still lie hidden beneath the layers of time, waiting for discovery. From the fertile volcanic plains of El Salvador, where Joya de Cerén preserves the rhythms of everyday life frozen in ash, our journey now takes us to the lowlands of the Yangtze River Delta in eastern China, where water, rice, and earth converge to cradle one of the most enigmatic cities of the Neolithic world, Liangzhu City. Unlike the intimate domestic streets of Joya de Cerén, Liangzhu unfolds as a sprawling urban center, monumental yet submerged, a metropolis built on the delicate interplay of human ingenuity and watery landscapes. At first glance, the area appears serene, a patchwork of rice paddies and rivers that have sustained life for millennia. Yet beneath the surface lie remnants of an advanced city that flourished around 3,300 to 2,300 BC. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of towering earthen platforms, massive jade workshops, and intricate water management systems that speak of a civilization with both technical sophistication and social complexity far beyond what might be expected for its time. Liangzhu City was not a scattered collection of villages. It was a planned urban environment, with evidence of residential districts, ceremonial centers, and defensive structures, all carefully arranged across a landscape of canals, ponds, and embankments. Walking through the site in imagination, one can see the scale of human effort that went into its creation. Terraces and platforms rise above marshy wetlands, constructed with layers of earth and stone that would have required coordinated labor, engineering knowledge, and meticulous planning. These were not temporary settlements. They were intended to endure. But why did the Liangzhu people invest such immense energy into shaping their environment? Was it purely practical, a matter of controlling water and cultivating rice, or did it carry spiritual significance, linking land and ritual in ways now obscured by time? One of the most remarkable aspects of Liangzhu is its association with jade. The city contains evidence of large-scale production of finely carved jade artifacts, often interpreted as ritual objects or symbols of status. Delicate Kong and Bai discs, intricately incised, have been found in burial sites, suggesting a deep spiritual or ceremonial significance. The precision of these artifacts is astonishing, achieved without metal tools. How did artisans develop such skill, and what knowledge was required to produce objects that survive millennia without losing their luster? Were these symbols of power, conduits of spiritual energy, or both? The city's engineering is equally compelling. Excavations reveal an extensive system of levees, canals, and ponds designed to manage water, protect the city from floods, and irrigate crops. Some scholars argue that Liangzhu represents one of the earliest examples of hydraulic civilization, societies whose power is derived not only from leadership and labor, but also from the control of water. Yet even with careful study, the full extent of these networks is difficult to reconstruct. How did inhabitants coordinate such large-scale projects? Were there centralized authorities directing labor, or did communities operate collaboratively through shared knowledge and tradition? Despite its sophistication, Liangzhu's decline is as mysterious as its rise. By around 2300 BC, the city was abandoned, its structures slowly buried under sediment and water. Was this the result of climatic change, shifting river courses, social upheaval, or some combination of these factors? Archaeologists have found evidence of flooding that may have forced residents to leave, but the precise mechanisms remain unclear. Why would a civilization with such apparent organization and technical skill suddenly vanish, leaving behind monumental platforms and carefully placed jade relics? Beyond the practical and material, Liangzhu raises profound questions about culture, ritual, and belief. The city's layout, the placement of ceremonial spaces, and the deliberate selection of burial goods suggest that spiritual life was intertwined with urban design. Some researchers propose that the city's structures were aligned with cosmological principles, mapping human existence onto celestial or environmental patterns. Were these alignments coincidental, or did they reflect a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, geography, and the cosmos? And if so, how much knowledge of this kind has been lost to time? Liangzhu also challenges assumptions about social hierarchy and governance in early cities. The scale of construction and the distribution of ritual artifacts imply some form of centralized authority, yet the evidence is fragmentary. Were kings or priests directing labor, or was social cohesion maintained through ritual and shared beliefs? Could the city have functioned as a ceremonial capital rather than a purely administrative hub, with its grand structures serving symbolic rather than utilitarian purposes? Even more enigmatic is the human story embedded in the city's burial sites. Elaborate graves suggest the existence of elite classes, yet they coexist with ordinary domestic spaces, giving the impression of a society where spiritual and practical life were deeply entwined. How did ordinary citizens relate to these elites? Were they participants in rituals, witnesses to power, or active shapers of urban culture? And what of the unmarked graves, or those yet undiscovered? What voices, stories, or knowledge might they contain? As modern technology allows archaeologists to peer further into Liangzhu's past, through ground-penetrating radar, sediment analysis, and digital reconstruction, the city continues to resist full understanding. Its water systems hint at an ecological wisdom, its jade artifacts speak of ritual complexity, and its earthen platforms stand as silent witnesses to human ambition and ingenuity. And yet, for all the knowledge we have gathered, Liangzhu preserves mysteries that may never be fully resolved. Standing on the remnants of the city today, imagining the canals shimmering in sunlight and the jade glinting in ceremonial hands, it is impossible not to be struck by the ingenuity and vision of its builders. Liangzhu reminds us that early civilizations were capable of astonishing technical skill, social organization, and spiritual insight. Yet even the most sophisticated societies can vanish, leaving behind tantalizing traces of their lives. What secrets remain buried beneath the waterlogged soil? How much more could we learn about the people who shaped this remarkable city, their beliefs, and their knowledge of the natural world? And most profoundly, what does Liangzhu tell us about the fragility and resilience of human ambition across time? From the watery platforms and jade workshops of Liangzhu, where human ingenuity met the rivers of the Yangtze Delta, our journey now carries us westward across continents and centuries, to the rugged highlands of southeastern Sicily. Here, the landscape is dramatic. Steep gorges cut by the Aleppo River, cliffs that rise abruptly from fertile valleys, and terraces that have been sculpted by both nature and human hands over millennia. Amid this imposing terrain lies one of the Mediterranean's most enigmatic sites, the Necropolis of Pantalica, a vast cemetery carved into the limestone cliffs, silent yet monumental, a testament to lives long past. At first glance, Pantalica is breathtaking in scale and stark in beauty. Thousands of rock-cut tombs, locally known as loculi, dot the canyon walls, appearing as if the cliffs themselves had been hollowed out by unseen hands. The tombs vary in size, from small single-chamber graves to larger, more elaborate multi-room chambers, often carefully aligned along natural ledges or terraces. From a distance, they resemble the marks of a giant hand, an ancient pattern etched into stone, visible only to those who pause and observe. Archaeologists date the site to between 1300 and 700 BC, placing it in the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age. Yet despite centuries of study, many questions about Pantalica remain unresolved. Why were these tombs cut directly into cliffs rather than built as freestanding structures? What prompted communities to concentrate burial in this dramatic, inaccessible location? And what do the varying sizes and shapes of the tombs reveal about social hierarchy, ritual, or identity among the ancient Sicilian population? Walking along the narrow pathways that wind through the gorges today, one can sense both the practical and the symbolic. The cliffs offered natural protection from invaders, yet the effort required to carve tombs into vertical rock would have been immense. Did this labor serve merely as a practical solution for interment, or did the act of carving into the living stone carry spiritual or ceremonial significance? Some scholars suggest that the vertical placement of tombs might have symbolized a connection between the mortal world and the heavens, a visual reminder of life's transition to the afterlife. Evidence from the tombs themselves adds to the mystery. Excavations have revealed skeletal remains, pottery, bronze weapons, and personal items, yet many loculi remain empty or poorly preserved. The material culture suggests that the inhabitants practiced both inhumation and cremation, with variations that hint at complex ritual traditions. Could differences in tomb contents reflect social status, familial connections, or even occupation? Or were they expressions of beliefs now lost to history, ceremonial choices whose meaning we can only speculate upon? Beyond the tombs, the surrounding landscape offers further intrigue. Pantalica is part of a larger network of settlements and fortifications scattered across the Hyblaean Mountains. Nearby hilltop villages, defensive terraces, and hidden paths indicate that the people who built the necropolis were not isolated. They controlled land, resources, and communication routes in a challenging environment. Yet the reasons for such concentration of burial sites remain elusive. Was Pantalica a communal necropolis, drawing people from surrounding valleys? Or did it serve as a ceremonial center, a sacred focal point where the dead were honored collectively rather than individually? Some of the more speculative theories revolve around the sheer scale and precision of the tombs. Carving a loculus required careful planning, a mastery of stoneworking techniques, and significant labor coordination. Did the builders of Pantalica possess specialized knowledge passed down through generations? Could the necropolis also encode astronomical alignments or sacred geometry, connecting the earthly world with celestial patterns in ways we are only beginning to investigate? While there is little direct evidence for these possibilities, the precision and organization of the site invite such questions. Pantalica also raises deeper mysteries about the society that created it. What social structures allowed for the coordination of labor required to construct thousands of tombs? How were resources allocated for burial rituals, and what belief systems guided the placement of each loculus? Unlike monumental palaces or temples, the necropolis is silent on the surface, offering no written record, no inscriptions that reveal the names, achievements, or beliefs of its people. And yet, in its very absence of narrative, it tells a story of human effort, reverence for the dead, and engagement with the dramatic Sicilian landscape. The site's isolation and topography also raise questions about access and visibility. From the bottom of the gorge, the tombs appear almost hidden, their openings blending into the cliffs. Was this concealment intentional, designed to protect the dead from intruders, or to create a sacred liminal space between the living and the afterlife? And as centuries of erosion have altered the cliffs, how much of the original layout and alignment has been lost, leaving us to reconstruct patterns and purposes from incomplete evidence? Standing amid the necropolis today, with the sun casting long shadows over the limestone walls and the Aleppo River whispering below, it is impossible not to feel the weight of countless generations. Pantalica endures as both monument and mystery, a record of human life and death, labor and devotion, yet one that resists full understanding. How much remains buried in the cliffs, hidden from view? What stories, rituals, and knowledge lie in the loculi yet unexamined? And ultimately, what can Pantalica teach us about the ways ancient communities faced mortality, memory, and the enduring power of landscape itself. The Necropolis of Pantalica, silent for thousands of years, continues to challenge our understanding of prehistoric Sicily. Its tombs are at once ordinary and extraordinary, human and monumental, tangible and enigmatic. As we trace the paths along the cliffs and peer into the loculi carved with painstaking care, we are reminded that even in the absence of written record, human ambition, belief, and reverence can leave marks that endure far longer than a single lifetime, and that some of history's most profound mysteries remain just out of reach. From the cliff-carved silence of Pantalica, where thousands of ancient tombs cling to the limestone above winding river gorges, our journey now moves north once again, across the Mediterranean, beyond the hills of Sicily, and into the mist-laced landscapes of southern England. The terrain changes, but the sense of lingering antiquity remains. Here, beneath wide skies and rolling chalk plains, lies a vast prehistoric enclosure that continues to challenge what we understand about Neolithic Britain. At first, the landscape appears almost gentle, grasslands stretching outward in soft undulations, broken only by hedgerows and distant trees. But beneath this quiet surface lies something immense. A broad, circular earthwork, so large it seems to reshape the land itself. Durrington Walls. Even from above, its scale is difficult to grasp. The enclosure spans more than 400 meters across, formed by a massive bank and ditch that once defined a boundary between inside and outside, sacred and ordinary, known and unknown. Today, much of it lies flattened by time and agriculture, yet its original presence still resonates through the landscape. It is one of the largest known Neolithic settlements in Britain, dating back to around 2600 BC, constructed during the same cultural horizon that produced nearby stone monuments that still dominate the imagination. But what exactly was Durrington Walls? Archaeological evidence suggests it was not a single-purpose monument, but a complex living site. Excavations have revealed traces of wooden houses, hearths, pottery, animal bones, and signs of seasonal occupation. It appears that thousands of people may have gathered here at certain times of the year, forming a large settlement that was temporary yet intensely organized. Unlike stone-built ceremonial sites designed for permanence, Durrington Walls seems to have been built in wood and earth, materials that speak of impermanence, movement, and gathering. And yet, this is where the mystery begins to deepen. Why would such a vast community assemble here, in what appears to be a structured but temporary settlement? And why so close, almost connected in purpose, to one of the most enigmatic stone landscapes in Britain? Just a short distance away lies a monumental circle of standing stones, aligned with astronomical events and carefully positioned within the broader sacred geography of the region. Durrington Walls appears to sit within this same ritual landscape, as if it were part of a larger system whose full design we are only beginning to reconstruct. Was it a place of living, celebration, and preparation, while nearby stone circles served the dead or the eternal? Or was the relationship more complex than such simple divisions allow? One of the most widely discussed interpretations suggests that Durrington Walls may have been a seasonal gathering site tied to ritual cycles. Evidence of large-scale feasting, animal bones, especially pigs, shows signs of being brought from distant regions and consumed in great numbers, points to events that may have drawn people from across Britain. This was not an isolated village, but a destination, a place where communities converged, perhaps for ceremonies, exchanges, or shared beliefs that transcended local identity. But even this explanation raises further questions. If people traveled long distances to reach Durrington Walls, what exactly drew them here? Trade alone seems insufficient to explain the scale of activity. Some researchers suggest that it may have been part of a ritual journey, where movement through the landscape itself carried symbolic meaning. In this view, arriving at Durrington Walls was not just a physical act, but a transition. One stage in a larger ceremonial pathway that connected life, death, and the cosmos. This interpretation becomes even more intriguing when considering the nearby stone monuments, which appear to be aligned with solar cycles. Some theories propose a conceptual division between wood and stone, wood representing life, impermanence, and the living community, stone representing ancestors, permanence, and the enduring realm beyond death. In this framework, Durrington Walls may have been the living counterpart to a more enduring stone ceremonial center nearby. But is this a reflection of actual Neolithic belief, or a modern attempt to impose order on fragmented evidence? The site's structure adds another layer of complexity. The massive bank and ditch enclosure suggests boundaries, yet the internal layout indicates movement and gathering rather than strict containment. Houses were clustered, but not rigidly organized like later urban centers such as Uruk. Instead, there is a sense of fluidity, spaces used, abandoned, rebuilt, and reshaped over time. What kind of social system produces such a pattern? Was authority centralized, or was it shared among groups who temporarily came together and dispersed again? Then there is the question of timing. Radiocarbon dating places the main occupation of Durrington Walls within a relatively short period, perhaps only a few generations. This suggests a burst of intense activity rather than continuous settlement over centuries. Why would such a massive construction effort be concentrated into such a narrow window of time? Was it linked to environmental conditions, social transformation, or a ritual moment of extraordinary significance? Some more speculative interpretations venture further. Could Durrington Walls represent not just a settlement, but a symbolic reconstruction of cosmological ideas, a landscape designed to mirror unseen structures in the sky or the afterlife? Others have suggested that its scale hints at coordinated planning on a level not typically associated with Neolithic societies, raising questions about leadership, communication, and shared knowledge across regions. While mainstream archaeology remains cautious about such ideas, the sheer scale of the site continues to invite broader speculation. Even the relationship between humans and animals at Durrington Walls deepens the mystery. The evidence of large feasts involving pigs brought from distant regions suggests not only economic organization, but cultural intention. Why transport animals over long distances only to consume them in massive gatherings? Was this an act of display, unity, or ritual transformation? And what meaning did such gatherings hold for those who participated? Did they see them as celebrations, obligations, or something closer to communion with forces beyond human life? Today, the landscape of Durrington Walls appears quiet again. Grass covers the earthworks, and the wind moves across the plain as it has for thousands of years. Yet beneath that quiet surface lies evidence of extraordinary human coordination, belief, and activity. A place where thousands once gathered, lived temporarily, and then vanished, leaving only subtle traces behind. And so the question remains, was Durrington Walls a settlement, a ceremonial gathering place, a stage in a ritual landscape, or something that does not fit neatly into any category we currently understand? What purpose did this vast enclosure truly serve, and how much of its meaning is still locked within the soil, waiting for future discovery? From the misty plains of southern England, where communities once gathered at Durrington Walls in ritual cycles of life and celebration, our journey now arcs southward across continents and millennia, arriving in a city whose stones whisper stories of empire, conquest, and endurance. The Aleppo Citadel. Rising dramatically from the heart of one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities, this fortress dominates the skyline, perched upon a tell that has borne human settlement for over 5,000 years. Its massive walls, weathered yet defiant, are a living palimpsest of history, stone upon stone, layer upon layer, each corner and bastion a record of civilizations that have shaped the ancient Levant. Even today, the citadel's scale and presence are staggering. From below, the hill itself seems natural, yet closer inspection reveals the calculated labor of countless builders who shaped the elevation into a defensible stronghold. Its outer walls, constructed in formidable stone and punctuated by massive towers, rise in imposing sweeps, while within, courtyards, cisterns, vaulted halls, and secret passages form a labyrinthine interior that has protected kings, soldiers, and citizens alike across centuries. One cannot help but wonder, how many have walked these corridors, and how much of their lives remains etched into these stones, hidden beneath layers of repair, reconstruction, and decay. The citadel's history begins long before recorded chronicles. Archaeological evidence indicates that the tell upon which it stands was occupied as early as the 3rd millennium BC. Some historians suggest that it was originally a fortified settlement, a place where communities sought protection against invaders and nature alike. Over time, successive civilizations, Hittites, Assyrians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and various Islamic dynasties, would expand, remodel, and reimagine the citadel, each leaving behind architectural fingerprints and leaving historians to piece together the mosaic of its past. The sheer diversity of construction techniques within the citadel reflects these layered histories. Stone blocks from different eras, walls of varying thickness, and architectural styles that span millennia coexist in a single monumental complex. Some sections appear seamless, as if the builders intended permanence. Others reveal hurried repairs or improvisation, hinting at times of siege, destruction, or political upheaval. What drove these cycles of construction and destruction? Was it simply practical defense? Or did rulers intentionally reshape the citadel to assert their authority, to inscribe their legacy into the very heart of Aleppo? The citadel's strategic location provides additional insight. Rising above the surrounding city and commanding views of trade routes, agricultural plains, and the surrounding hills, it was more than a military installation. It was a symbol of power, a nexus of governance, commerce, and control. For travelers approaching Aleppo in antiquity, the citadel must have appeared as a formidable presence, a reminder of the city's wealth, influence, and the vigilance of its rulers. And yet, for all its strength, it has endured earthquakes, invasions, and centuries of neglect, standing as a testament to both human ingenuity and the persistence of nature. Among the citadel's most intriguing mysteries is the interplay between its tangible architecture and the intangible, ritual, belief, and secrecy. Within its walls lie cisterns and subterranean chambers, some whose original purpose remains unclear. Were these simply water storage and defensive tunnels, or did they serve ceremonial functions, repositories for sacred objects, or hidden meeting places for elites? Some passages are deliberately narrow or winding, suggesting control over movement and perception. Was this design purely defensive, or did it carry symbolic meaning, a physical representation of the relationship between ruler, city, and cosmos? The citadel has also been a stage for extraordinary historical events, many of which remain partially obscured in records or interpretation. During the medieval Islamic period, it served as a military and administrative center, witnessing sieges, revolts, and diplomatic negotiations. Each episode left traces, collapsed walls, rebuilt gates, carved inscriptions, but these fragments often raise more questions than they answer. Which parts were purely functional, and which were designed to impress, intimidate, or communicate power through architecture? Could certain structural anomalies hint at lost ceremonial or defensive knowledge, now forgotten? Artifacts found within and around the citadel amplify the enigma. Pottery, coins, inscriptions, and small objects tell a story of daily life amidst monumental architecture. Yet many of these finds challenge assumptions about Aleppo's role in ancient trade networks, social hierarchy, and cultural exchange. How far-reaching were these connections, and what knowledge, beliefs, or technologies were transmitted along these networks? And what evidence has been lost to time, looting, or natural decay, leaving gaps that modern researchers struggle to fill? Even the citadel's layout provokes speculation. Its concentric design, with defensive walls surrounding inner compounds, is typical of ancient fortifications. Yet some scholars argue that subtle alignments and orientations may have symbolic or astronomical significance. Could certain gates, towers, or corridors have been placed to correspond with solstices, celestial events, or sacred landscapes beyond the city walls? While concrete evidence remains elusive, the possibility that the citadel functioned as both practical fortress and cosmologically informed structure invites deeper reflection. Time and natural forces have left their marks as well. Earthquakes have toppled walls and triggered collapses, yet the citadel persists, often rebuilt atop previous ruins. This constant layering creates a palimpsest of human endeavor and adaptation, where the past is never fully erased but absorbed into new construction. How much of Aleppo's early architectural knowledge has been lost or transformed in this ongoing cycle of destruction and reconstruction? And what hidden chambers, inscriptions, or artifacts still lie undiscovered beneath its stones? The modern city surrounding the citadel adds another layer of complexity. Urban expansion, conflict, and reconstruction have both obscured and protected the ancient site. The citadel is a monument that has outlasted empires, yet it remains vulnerable to human activity and natural decay. How can one fully understand a site that is alive, changing, and intertwined with contemporary life, even as it carries the weight of millennia? Standing today within its courtyards, one cannot escape the sense of presence that pervades the citadel. Sunlight filters through arches and onto worn stone floors, echoing off walls that have seen generations of rulers, soldiers, and citizens pass. The hum of the modern city contrasts sharply with the silence of ancient chambers, yet somehow both exist together, creating a dialogue across time. It is a place where history is palpable, where the boundary between recorded events and lingering mysteries blurs, and where every stone invites questions about human ambition, resilience, and imagination. The Aleppo Citadel endures not only as a fortress of stone, but as a monument to the enigmas of human civilization itself. It reminds us that even in places where evidence seems abundant, gaps remain, spaces where questions outnumber answers, and where the past resists full comprehension. What secrets are still buried beneath its terraces and walls? How much of the knowledge, ritual, and daily life of its inhabitants can ever be reconstructed? And perhaps most provocatively, how many mysteries lie hidden in plain sight, waiting for future generations to piece together fragments of a story that has been unfolding for 5 millennia? As we gaze across the sprawling courtyards, peer down into ancient cisterns, and trace the outlines of walls constructed and reconstructed over centuries, we are left with both awe and wonder. The Aleppo Citadel is more than a monument. It is a living puzzle, a reminder of human ingenuity, and an enduring question. How do we interpret the past when so much remains silent, yet so much still speaks through stone, earth, and the echoes of lives long gone? From the towering stones and enduring presence of the Aleppo Citadel, where successive civilizations etched their power into the heart of a city alive for millennia, our exploration now carries us across oceans and continents to the highlands of Guatemala. Here, nestled amid volcanic peaks and fertile valleys, lies one of Mesoamerica's most intriguing and enigmatic urban centers, Kaminaljuyu. Today, the site may seem quiet and partially obscured by the sprawling modern city of Guatemala City, yet beneath the surface lie the foundations of a metropolis that flourished for more than a millennium, leaving questions as enduring as the pyramids it produced. Kaminaljuyu rises subtly from the valley floor, its pyramidal mounds and terraced platforms hinting at the grandeur that once defined it. Unlike the monumental stone cities of later Maya civilization, Kaminaljuyu was constructed primarily from earth and local stone, yet its scale is staggering. Archaeologists have identified more than 200 structures across the site, including pyramids, ceremonial platforms, plazas, and residential compounds. From above, the mounds form a labyrinthine pattern that suggests careful urban planning, but much of the city's layout remains hidden beneath the modern urban sprawl, challenging researchers to reconstruct a past that is only partially visible. The city's origins date back to around 1500 BC, placing Kaminaljuyu among the earliest significant settlements in Mesoamerica. Yet its prominence rises dramatically during the Middle and late pre-classic periods, around 500 BC to 200 AD, when it became a central hub for trade, culture, and ritual activity in the highlands. Obsidian, jade, and other valuable materials flowed through Kaminaljuyu, connecting it with distant regions, from the volcanic highlands of central Guatemala to the Pacific coast and beyond. This network suggests not only economic sophistication, but also the capacity for long-distance diplomacy and cultural exchange, hinting at a society both complex and interconnected. Walking through the ruins, or imagining the spaces where modern buildings now cover ancient plazas, one can sense a deliberate interplay between environment and urban design. The mounds rise strategically, commanding views of the surrounding valley and creating sightlines that likely held both practical and symbolic significance. Scholars speculate that these alignments may have corresponded to solar or lunar cycles, with certain platforms oriented to mark solstices, equinoxes, or other celestial events. Did these alignments reflect agricultural cycles, religious observances, or cosmological beliefs that guided the rhythms of daily life? And if so, how much of this knowledge has been lost, leaving only tantalizing hints in the orientation of stone and earth? Artifacts uncovered at Kaminaljuyu offer glimpses into a society at once sophisticated and enigmatic. Excavations have revealed elaborate burials, often containing jade ornaments, ceramics, and other offerings. In some cases, tombs are placed beneath pyramids or platforms, suggesting a deliberate integration of death, memory, and monumentality. The wealth and craftsmanship of these burials indicate social hierarchy and the emergence of elite classes, yet many questions remain. Who were the individuals honored in these tombs? How did their authority extend over the city and the surrounding region? And what beliefs guided the choice of burial, sacrifice, and material offerings, which appear both highly structured and deeply symbolic? Trade and craft production add further layers of mystery. Kaminaljuyu was a hub for obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for both utilitarian and ceremonial purposes. Workshops scattered across the site indicate sophisticated methods for shaping blades, tools, and ornaments. Yet the sources of obsidian were often distant, requiring organized transport and knowledge of regional geology. How did Kaminaljuyu maintain control over these networks, and what social or political structures allowed such coordination across hundreds of kilometers? Were these networks primarily economic, or did they serve ritual and symbolic purposes, binding distant communities together in shared cultural or spiritual systems? The city's layout also invites speculation about its ritual and ceremonial life. Large platforms and plazas suggest gatherings for performance, political assembly, or religious ceremony. Some scholars propose that certain structures were dedicated to celestial observation, while others may have served as stages for the enactment of myth, history, or cosmology. The repetition of architectural motifs, pyramids, altars, and stepped platforms across the site hints at deliberate design principles, yet the meanings encoded within them remain largely speculative. Were these spaces primarily functional, or did they embody cosmological concepts now lost to time? Kaminaljuju's decline, around 900 AD, is another source of intrigue. While the reasons are not fully understood, the city's abandonment coincides with broader transformations in the highlands, including shifts in trade networks, environmental stress, and the rise of other regional powers. Archaeologists have noted evidence of seismic activity, erosion, and possible resource depletion, but none of these factors alone seem sufficient to explain the city's rapid decline. Could social unrest, political fragmentation, or ritual upheaval have played a decisive role? Or were there factors we cannot yet perceive, hidden in the soils, mounds, and artifacts still waiting to be uncovered? The urban layering of Kaminaljuyu adds a final challenge. Unlike cities preserved as monumental ruins, much of Kaminaljuyu lies beneath modern development, often invisible to the casual observer. Archaeological work has relied on both excavation and innovative methods, including aerial photography, ground-penetrating radar, and magnetometry, to map the hidden structures below. Each discovery reveals new complexity: previously unknown platforms, residential compounds, and ceremonial features emerge, yet the full scale of the city, its streets, and its public spaces remain only partially understood. What other secrets lie beneath the city streets of modern Guatemala City, still concealed by concrete and asphalt, waiting to be revealed by patient investigation? As we examine Kaminaljuyu, one cannot ignore the intangible aspects of its mystery. The city is not merely a collection of structures or artifacts. It represents a civilization's vision, its priorities, and its understanding of the cosmos. The placement of platforms, the alignment of buildings, the distribution of wealth and ritual objects, all suggest a society deeply engaged with questions of power, belief, and human meaning. Yet without written records, we are left to interpret these signs, aware that each conclusion may only capture part of the story. Standing today among the partially excavated mounds, with the distant volcanoes looming above the valley, one can sense the rhythm of life that once flowed through the city. Children may have played in plazas, merchants traded obsidian and jade, priests performed ceremonies atop sunlit platforms, and rulers directed the affairs of a complex, interconnected society. And yet, just beneath the surface, the earth holds secrets still unspoken, tombs undiscovered, artifacts unexcavated, alignments unrecognized. How much of Kaminaljuyu's story has been lost to time, and how much remains hidden, waiting for the next generation of explorers and archaeologists to uncover its layers? Kaminaljuyu is a city that challenges our assumptions about ancient urbanism. Its scale, sophistication, and longevity suggest a civilization capable of organizing labor, managing resources, and enacting ritual on a monumental scale long before the rise of more famous Mesoamerican cities. And yet, it remains enigmatic, its full story elusive, its voice only partially heard through the mounds and artifacts that survive. What does this city tell us about the people who built it, their beliefs, and their place within a broader network of highland and lowland civilizations? And perhaps most compellingly, what remains beneath the earth, waiting for discovery, that might redefine our understanding of Mesoamerican history? As we step back from the mounds of Kaminaljuyu and gaze toward the surrounding highlands, it is clear that this is a place where history and mystery intertwine. The city stands as a monument not only to human ingenuity and resilience, but also to the questions that endure across millennia. What drove these people to build such a city, in this location, with such precision and purpose? What meanings did they encode in earth and stone, and how much of that knowledge has been lost to time? Kaminaljuyu reminds us that even as we uncover layers of the past, some mysteries endure, compelling us to look deeper, to question, and to imagine the lives that once animated this ancient highland metropolis. From the highland mounds of Kaminaljuyu, Where ancient earthworks still lie buried beneath the modern rhythm of Guatemala City, our journey now turns once again across continents, northward and eastward, following the long arc of early civilizations that rose, transformed, and disappeared into layered histories. The landscape changes dramatically. The dense tropical valleys give way to rugged Anatolian highlands, where mountains carve deep silhouettes against the sky and ancient trade routes once threaded through narrow passes. Here, in eastern Anatolia, near the modern city of Erzincan in Turkey, stands a fortress that seems to grow directly from the mountain itself, Altıntepe Fortress. Perched on a volcanic hill overlooking the Euphrates Valley, it is a place where stone, earth, and sky converge, where human ambition once reshaped a natural rise into a commanding stronghold that watched over one of the ancient world's most strategically important corridors. At first glance, Altıntepe appears like many hilltop ruins scattered across Anatolia. But as the light shifts across its terraces, a more complex structure begins to emerge. Massive stone foundations, remnants of defensive walls, and the outlines of once grand buildings reveal a carefully planned, fortified settlement. Archaeologists attribute its primary construction to the Urartian civilization, dating roughly to the 9th to 7th centuries BC, a kingdom that once rivaled Assyria and controlled vast territories around Lake Van and eastern Anatolia. Yet Altıntepe is not simply a military outpost. It is a layered site, one that reveals traces of administrative buildings, religious structures, storage facilities, and burial chambers. This suggests a fortress that functioned not only as a defensive position, but as a living center of governance, ritual, and daily life. And it is precisely this combination, military strength intertwined with sacred and administrative purpose, that gives Altıntepe its enduring sense of mystery. The most striking feature of the site is its citadel complex, built on a high plateau that dominates the surrounding valley. From here, ancient observers would have had sweeping visibility across the Euphrates basin. One can imagine watchmen scanning the horizon for movement along trade routes, or messengers arriving with news from distant provinces. But beyond its strategic importance, the architecture hints at something more symbolic. The arrangement of buildings, courtyards, and temples suggests deliberate spatial planning, possibly reflecting cosmological or ideological principles central to Urartian identity. What kind of worldview shaped such a place? Was Altıntepe designed purely as a fortress of control, or did it embody a deeper conception of order, one in which political authority, religious belief, and natural landscape were inseparable? Within the citadel, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of a temple complex, often attributed to the Urartian pantheon. Altars, carved stone bases, and ritual installations suggest that ceremonies were conducted within the fortress walls, possibly linking royal authority with divine sanction. The Urartian kings were known to present themselves as chosen by their god Haldi, and Altıntepe may have played a role in reinforcing that ideology. But even here, certainty begins to dissolve into interpretation. Some scholars suggest that certain architectural alignments within Altıntepe may correspond to celestial observations. The positioning of structures relative to surrounding peaks and the movement of the sun has led to speculation that the fortress may have incorporated astronomical knowledge into its design. Were these alignments intentional markers of seasonal change, agricultural cycles, or ritual timing? Or are we seeing patterns imposed by modern interpretation onto ancient construction? The burial chambers discovered at Altıntepe add another layer of complexity. Among the most notable finds are richly furnished tombs containing weapons, jewelry, pottery, and ceremonial objects. These graves suggest a society with clearly defined social hierarchies, where elites were buried with material symbols of power and status. Yet the presence of both military and ritual objects within the same burial spaces raises questions about how the Urartians understood identity and death. Were warriors also priests? Were rulers seen as intermediaries between earthly and divine realms? And then there is the question of continuity. Altıntepe did not exist in isolation. It was part of a wider network of Urartian fortresses, cities, and administrative centers spread across the highlands. These sites formed a connected system of control over trade routes, resources, and local populations. Yet despite this apparent organization, the Urartian civilization itself eventually declined and disappeared from historical records by the late 6th century BC. The reasons remain debated. Assyrian pressure, internal fragmentation, shifting trade dynamics, or environmental changes may all have played a role. But Altıntepe itself raises a more subtle question. What happened to the people who lived here? Unlike some abandoned cities that show clear signs of sudden destruction, Altıntepe reveals a more gradual transformation. Layers of occupation suggest periods of reuse and adaptation, followed by eventual abandonment. Was this a peaceful transition, or a slow erosion of political and economic significance? Even more intriguing is the way later cultures interacted with the site. Evidence suggests that the fortress was reused in subsequent periods, possibly by Armenian, Byzantine, or medieval communities, each leaving traces of modification and reuse. This creates a palimpsest effect, where one civilization's architecture becomes the foundation for another's, layering meaning upon meaning across centuries. But in this process, original functions and symbolic systems may have been lost or transformed beyond recognition. Walking through Altıntepe today, one encounters fragments rather than complete structures. Stone foundations emerge from the soil like skeletal remains of a once organized system. Walls hint at corridors that no longer exist. Courtyards open into spaces that once held movement, sound, and ritual, now filled only with wind. It is a place that invites reconstruction, yet resists certainty. And so interpretation becomes both necessary and fragile. Was Altıntepe primarily a military fortress, designed to project power across the Euphrates Valley? Or was it something more complex, a ceremonial center where political authority was reinforced through ritual performance, astronomical alignment, and sacred geography? Could it have functioned as both simultaneously, embodying a worldview in which separation between the sacred and the strategic did not exist? Some more speculative interpretations suggest that sites like Altıntepe may have encoded knowledge systems that are not yet fully understood, patterns of spatial organization that reflect lost traditions of measurement, cosmology, or symbolic geography. While mainstream archaeology approaches such ideas cautiously, the precision and intentionality of certain design elements continue to provoke questions. Why were specific orientations chosen? Why were certain structures placed at elevated points while others were hidden or enclosed? Even the landscape itself seems to participate in the mystery. The fortress is not imposed upon the mountain so much as integrated into it, as if the natural form and human construction were intended to merge into a single entity. Was this purely practical, taking advantage of defensive terrain, or was there a deeper symbolic intention, a belief that power must be rooted in the contours of the earth itself? As the sun sets over the Anatolian highlands, casting long shadows across the stone foundations of Altıntepe, the site takes on a quieter presence. The silence is not empty, but layered, filled with echoes of movement, governance, ritual, and daily life that once animated these spaces. Yet those echoes remain fragmented, incomplete, resisting full reconstruction. And so we are left with an enduring uncertainty. How much of Altıntepe's purpose has truly been understood, and how much remains hidden beneath centuries of erosion, reuse, and silence? What knowledge once passed through its halls and temples has been lost entirely, and what fragments still lie beneath the soil, waiting for discovery? In the end, Altıntepe Fortress stands not only as a relic of the Urartian world, but as a reminder of how civilizations rise, transform, and fade, leaving behind structures that speak but never fully explain themselves. From the high mountain stronghold of Altıntepe, where the remnants of Urartian power still cling to the Anatolian hills, our journey now turns further south and west, crossing rugged highlands and deep river valleys into the Caucasus region. The landscape shifts again, steep cliffs, winding gorges, and volcanic plateaus shaped by both tectonic force and time. Here, carved into the face of a towering cliff above the Kura River Valley, lies one of the most astonishing examples of human ambition and devotion ever created in stone. Vardzia. At first glance, the cliff appears almost natural, an immense wall of tough rock, weathered by centuries of wind and water. But as the eye adjusts, subtle irregularities emerge, rows of dark openings, stacked like windows in a forgotten city, stretching across the mountainside. These are not caves formed by erosion. They are chambers, rooms, corridors, staircases, and tunnels, meticulously carved by human hands into the living rock. Vardzia is not built upon the mountain. It is carved into it. This vast cave monastery complex was constructed primarily during the 12th century AD, under the reign of King Georgi III, and later expanded by his daughter, Queen Tamar, one of the most influential rulers in Georgian history. What began as a fortified refuge evolved into a sprawling monastic and residential complex, containing hundreds of rooms connected through a labyrinth of passageways that descend deep into the cliff face. Churches, chapels, storage chambers, wine cellars, living quarters, and defensive positions all coexist within this single monumental structure. Yet even with its well-documented historical framework, Vardzia continues to evoke questions that extend beyond conventional explanation. Why carve an entire city into a cliff rather than construct it openly on the plateau above? Was this purely a defensive measure against invasion, particularly during periods of conflict with neighboring powers such as the Seljuks? Or did the act of living inside the mountain carry symbolic or spiritual significance? As one moves through the complex, whether physically or through reconstruction, the sense of enclosure becomes increasingly pronounced. Narrow tunnels open into vaulted chambers. Staircases twist unexpectedly into darkness. Windows carved into the cliff face frame vast views of the valley below, as if the mountain itself is both shelter and watchtower. The architecture does not simply occupy space, it reshapes perception. At the heart of Vardzia lies the Church of the Dormition, a richly decorated sacred space adorned with frescoes that have survived centuries of erosion and seismic activity. These paintings depict religious scenes with striking emotional intensity, figures rendered with expressive faces, layered symbolism, and a palette that still retains traces of its original vibrancy. Queen Tamar herself is believed to be depicted within these frescoes, a rare and powerful assertion of female authority in medieval Christian art. But beyond its artistic and historical significance, the church raises deeper interpretive questions. Why was such elaborate spiritual imagery embedded within a fortress monastery carved into rock? Was this integration of defense and devotion purely practical, or did it reflect a worldview in which physical survival and spiritual transcendence were inseparable? Archaeological evidence suggests that Vardzia was designed with remarkable foresight. Water systems were engineered to channel fresh water into the complex, allowing long-term habitation even under siege conditions. Secret tunnels may have provided escape routes or hidden supply lines. Storage chambers indicate preparation for extended isolation, suggesting that Vardzia was not merely a monastic retreat, but a fully functioning, self-sustaining underground city. And yet, despite this apparent practicality, the psychological experience of the site introduces another dimension. Standing within its narrow passageways, one cannot ignore the sensation of depth, not only physical, but conceptual. The mountain becomes both boundary and interior, a place where natural formation and human intention merge. Was this integration purely strategic, or did it reflect a belief that spiritual life required withdrawal into the earth itself, away from the chaos of the surface world? Some scholars have suggested that Vardzia represents more than a defensive monastery. In certain interpretations, cave monasteries across the Caucasus are seen as expressions of ascetic philosophy taken to architectural extremes, spaces where the material world is literally carved away to create proximity to the divine. In this view, the act of inhabiting stone is not only practical but symbolic, a form of permanent retreat from impermanence. But even within this interpretation, unanswered questions remain. Why was Vardzia expanded to such an enormous scale, eventually containing an estimated 600 to 700 rooms across multiple levels? Was it intended to house a large monastic community, a defensive population, or both? And how was such a vast project coordinated within the technological constraints of the 12th century? The precision of excavation suggests careful planning, yet no complete architectural blueprint survives to explain the full logic of its design. Then there is the question of decline. In 1283 AD, a devastating earthquake struck the region, collapsing large sections of the cliff face and exposing parts of the complex. This natural disaster marked a turning point in Vardzia's history. Water systems were damaged, structural integrity weakened, and portions of the complex became uninhabitable. Over time, the once thriving city of stone was partially abandoned, its remaining inhabitants forced to adapt to a reduced and fragmented environment. But even this explanation does not fully account for the site's long-term transformation. Why did certain sections remain in use while others were left untouched? How did communities decide which spaces to preserve and which to abandon? And what knowledge of engineering, geology, and structural stability guided these decisions? As centuries passed, Vardzia became less a living city and more a symbolic landscape, a site of memory, pilgrimage, and national identity. Monastic life persisted in reduced form, but the scale and intensity of its original function faded into history. Yet the mountain itself remains unchanged, still holding within its carved interior the traces of human ambition and belief. More speculative interpretations occasionally emerge in discussions of sites like Vardzia. Some suggest that its spatial organization may encode symbolic geometries or hidden numerical structures, reflecting a deeper cosmological understanding embedded within architecture. Others propose that cave systems such as this could have served as repositories of knowledge, secure environments where texts, rituals, or cultural memory were preserved away from external threats. While these ideas remain unproven, they reflect the enduring sense that Vardzia's design exceeds purely functional explanation. Even the relationship between light and space within the complex invites reflection. Openings carved into the cliff allow sunlight to penetrate deep into the interior, shifting throughout the day and season. Was this purely incidental, or was light deliberately incorporated into the experience of movement and worship? Did the builders intend for illumination to guide ritual practice, marking time and reinforcing spiritual meaning within enclosed stone? Today, Vardzia stands as both ruin and revelation. Earthquakes, erosion, and abandonment have reshaped its structure, yet its core essence remains intact. It is a place where human intention is etched directly into geology, where architecture becomes indistinguishable from landscape. Walking, or imagining walking, through its corridors evokes a sense of both intimacy and vastness, as if the mountain itself remembers the lives it once contained. And so the question persists, quietly embedded within the stone walls and shadowed tunnels. Was Vardzia simply a monastery carved for survival and devotion? Or does it represent a more complex vision of human existence, one in which shelter, spirituality, and landscape were fused into a single continuous form? What remains hidden within its deeper chambers, sealed or collapsed over centuries, and what might still be discovered that could reshape our understanding of its purpose? As the light fades across the cliffs of Georgia, Vardzia does not disappear. It endures, half revealed, half concealed, waiting, as it has for centuries, for someone to fully interpret what it was and what it was meant to be. From the carved silence of Vardzia, where entire chambers lie hidden within a Georgian cliff face like a forgotten memory embedded in stone, our journey now moves once again across the rugged landscapes of Anatolia. The mountains rise gradually, their slopes worn by time, wind, and human passage. Here, in the heart of central Turkey, the land opens into a rocky sanctuary where ancient stone walls are not built, but engraved directly into the living rock itself. This is Yazılıkaya, a sacred rock sanctuary that feels less like a constructed site and more like a place revealed, as if the earth itself was carefully peeled back to expose something already waiting beneath the surface. At first glance, it appears deceptively simple. Two natural rock chambers formed by towering limestone outcrops. But as one steps closer, the walls begin to speak, not in words, but in carved reliefs, arranged with striking precision across the stone surface. Here, figures emerge from the rock, deities, processions, symbolic animals, and mythological beings, all arranged in a silent ceremonial order. The sanctuary dates to the 13th century BC, during the Late Bronze Age, and is closely associated with the Hittite civilization, one of the great powers of ancient Anatolia. Yet unlike monumental cities or fortified palaces, Yazılıkaya is not a place of habitation or defense. It is a place of presence, a space seemingly designed for ritual encounter between the human and the divine. The larger chamber, often referred to as Chamber A, contains a procession of male deities carved into the rock wall, each one distinct yet arranged in a rhythmic sequence. Opposite them, female deities and mythological figures form another procession, their forms equally stylized, equally deliberate. At the far end, the composition culminates in a meeting point where divine figures converge, as if the entire space is oriented toward a single, unseen moment of encounter. But what exactly was that moment meant to represent? Mainstream archaeological interpretations suggest that Yazılıkaya functioned as a Hittite open-air temple, possibly connected to royal funerary rituals, seasonal festivals, or New Year ceremonies tied to the Hittite pantheon. The carvings are thought to represent a divine assembly, a symbolic gathering of gods reflecting the structure of Hittite cosmology. In this view, the sanctuary was not merely decorative or commemorative. It was an architectural expression of the universe itself, carved into stone for ritual observation. Yet even within this interpretation, uncertainties remain. Why was this specific location chosen? The rock chambers are not naturally prominent from a distance, nor are they easily accessible. Instead, they feel concealed, almost hidden within the landscape. Was this intentional, designed to restrict access, to create a sense of sacred secrecy? Or was the site chosen for geological reasons that held symbolic meaning now lost to time? As one studies the reliefs more closely, additional questions emerge. The figures are highly standardized, yet subtle differences in posture, attire, and symbolism suggest a complex system of meaning that is not fully understood. Some deities carry weapons, others hold staffs or symbolic objects, while certain hybrid figures, part human, part animal, occupy ambiguous positions within the procession. What roles did these beings represent in Hittite belief? Were they literal gods, ancestral spirits, or symbolic representations of natural forces such as storms, mountains, or celestial bodies? In Chamber B, the mystery deepens further. Here, a more intimate composition unfolds. A central relief depicts a prominent figure often interpreted as the storm god, standing upon mountain deities, while beneath him, smaller figures support the structure of the scene. The entire arrangement appears hierarchical, almost architectural in its composition. Some researchers have suggested that this chamber may have been associated with royal ideology, linking the authority of Hittite kings to divine sanction. But is this purely political symbolism, or does it reflect a deeper cosmological model, one in which kingship, nature, and divinity are inseparable layers of the same reality? The precision of the carvings also raises technical questions. How were such detailed reliefs executed on irregular rock surfaces using Bronze Age tools? The consistency of line work, the proportional balance of figures, and the integration of imagery with natural rock contours suggest a highly developed artistic and engineering tradition. Yet no detailed records survive to explain the methods or planning behind this monumental work. Was the sanctuary designed as a unified project, or did it evolve over generations, accumulating layers of meaning as new rulers added their own interpretations to the stone? Beyond its artistic and religious dimensions, Yazılıkaya also invites astronomical and calendrical speculation. Some scholars have proposed that the arrangement of deities may correspond to celestial cycles, possibly reflecting lunar months, seasonal transitions, or planetary movements. The repetition of certain figures and their placement within the chambers has led to theories that the sanctuary functioned not only as a temple, but also as a cosmic calendar, where ritual, timekeeping, and cosmology intersected in stone. Yet such interpretations remain debated. While symbolic alignments are intriguing, definitive evidence is elusive. Are we observing intentional astronomical encoding, or are we projecting modern patterns of analysis onto ancient religious art, whose meaning operated on entirely different conceptual frameworks? There is also the question of silence. Unlike urban temples filled with inscriptions describing rituals in detail, Yazılıkaya offers no written explanation of its purpose. The Hittites left behind extensive cuneiform archives elsewhere, yet this sanctuary remains almost entirely visual. It communicates through imagery rather than text, through spatial arrangement rather than narrative explanation. Why was this choice made? Was the meaning of Yazılıkaya intended to be understood only through initiation, memory, or oral tradition? Or was its symbolism deliberately ineffable, designed to evoke presence rather than explanation? Even the relationship between the sanctuary and nearby Hittite capital sites adds further complexity. Yazılıkaya is located near the ancient city of Hattusa, the political center of the Hittite Empire. Archaeological evidence suggests that the sanctuary was closely connected to royal activity, possibly serving as a site for coronation rituals or seasonal ceremonies involving the king himself. If so, then the carvings may represent not only divine figures, but also a reflection of political order, where earthly authority is mirrored in the structure of the heavens. But even this does not fully resolve its purpose. Why invest such extraordinary effort into carving an entire divine assembly into natural rock, away from the central urban landscape? Was this separation symbolic, emphasizing the distance between mortal cities and divine realms? Or was it practical, allowing rituals to take place in a controlled, secluded environment far from public observation? As centuries passed, the Hittite Empire declined, and Yazılıkaya was gradually abandoned. Yet the sanctuary remained, preserved by its carved stone and remote location. Unlike cities that were dismantled or rebuilt, Yazılıkaya endured in relative silence, its figures untouched by later architectural transformation. And still, they watch, deities frozen in procession, locked in an eternal moment of movement and gathering. Today, standing within the rocky chambers, one is confronted not only by art, but by absence. There is no explanation carved into the stone, no final interpretation left by its creators. Only figures, arranged with precision, facing each other across the chamber's walls, as if participating in a ceremony that never ended. And so the questions remain open, suspended in the silence of the sanctuary. Was Yazılıkaya a temple, a calendar, a political statement, or a gateway between worlds? Or does its true meaning exist in a conceptual space we have yet to reconstruct, one shaped by beliefs, perceptions, and cosmologies that no longer align with our own understanding of reality? As the light fades across the Anatolian rock face, the figures of Yazılıkaya do not disappear. They persist, etched into stone, waiting not for discovery, but for interpretation that may never fully arrive. From the silent rock chambers of Yazılıkaya, where divine figures are carved into Anatolian stone as if caught in an eternal procession, our journey now drifts westward once again, back toward the rolling chalk landscapes of southern England. The terrain shifts from rugged cliffs and carved sanctuaries to soft, open hills shaped by wind, grass, and time. Yet beneath this gentler surface lies another monument of profound antiquity, one that speaks not through carved images of gods, but through earth, silence, and enclosure. On the slopes of the Wiltshire countryside, near the ancient ceremonial landscape already familiar from Durrington Walls, rises a long earthen mound partially embedded into the hillside, West Kennet Long Barrow. At first glance, it appears almost natural, a low, elongated hill blending seamlessly into the contours of the land. But as one approaches, the geometry becomes unmistakable. Carefully constructed retaining stones line its sides. A deliberate, elongated shape stretches across the hillside, pointing toward the horizon like an arrow frozen in earth. This is not a natural formation. It is one of the largest and most significant Neolithic chambered tombs in Britain, constructed around 3650 BC, more than 5,000 years ago. The entrance, set into the eastern end of the mound, leads into a narrow stone passage that descends gently into darkness. The air changes immediately upon entry, cooler, still, and heavy with the sense of enclosure. Massive sarsen stones line the corridor, forming a structured pathway that leads into a series of burial chambers arranged along the central spine of the mound. These chambers once held the remains of dozens of individuals, placed carefully over generations. And yet, despite centuries of archaeological study, West Kennet Long Barrow continues to resist simple interpretation. It is widely understood that the structure functioned as a communal tomb during the Neolithic period, part of a broader tradition of long barrow construction across Britain. Human remains discovered within the chambers show evidence of repeated use, disarticulation, and selective burial practices. Some bones were moved, rearranged, or placed long after initial interment, suggesting that the tomb was not simply a final resting place, but a site of ongoing ritual interaction with the dead. But what exactly did this interaction mean? Mainstream archaeological interpretation suggests that West Kennet Long Barrow was part of a broader ancestor-focused belief system. The dead were not removed from the world of the living, but integrated into it, visited, revisited, and ritually engaged with over time. The tomb was not sealed in permanence, but remained open for centuries, functioning as a place where memory, identity, and lineage were continuously negotiated. Yet even within this framework, many questions remain unresolved. Why was this specific location chosen, on a hillside overlooking the wider Neolithic ceremonial landscape? Was the placement purely practical, or did it reflect a deliberate connection between the barrow and surrounding monuments such as stone circles, earthworks, and processional routes? Some researchers suggest that West Kennet Long Barrow may have been part of a larger ritual network, where movement through the landscape was as significant as the sites themselves. In this interpretation, the journey to the tomb was not incidental, it was essential. The approach along the hillside, the narrowing passage, the descent into darkness, all of it may have formed a structured experience, guiding participants through a transition from open landscape into enclosed ancestral space. Was this journey symbolic of death, memory, or transformation? Or did it represent something more complex, a shifting relationship between the living community and those who had passed beyond it. Inside the chambers, the arrangement of remains adds further layers of ambiguity. The bones are not found in orderly anatomical graves, but in mixed and curated deposits. Some skulls appear separated from bodies. Some bones were reintroduced after decomposition. This suggests that the tomb was revisited repeatedly, possibly over centuries, with changing practices of remembrance and ritual. But what guided these decisions? Were they governed by spiritual belief, social hierarchy, seasonal cycles, or oral traditions now lost? The architecture itself deepens the mystery. The massive sarsen stones used in construction were not locally uniform in origin, indicating significant effort in selecting, transporting, and positioning each block. Some stones weigh several tons, requiring coordinated labor and technical knowledge far beyond simple excavation. Yet there is no evidence of written planning or centralized instruction. How did Neolithic communities organize such complex construction projects? Was knowledge transmitted orally across generations, or embedded in ritual practices that unified engineering and belief? Beyond the tomb's immediate structure, its relationship with the surrounding landscape invites further reflection. West Kennet Long Barrow is positioned within a dense concentration of prehistoric monuments, stone circles, avenues, burial mounds, and ritual enclosures that span several kilometers. This has led many researchers to view the region not as isolated sites, but as an interconnected ceremonial landscape. Movement between these locations may have been structured, perhaps even processional, linking burial, ritual, and communal gathering into a continuous spatial experience. But if this landscape was so carefully organized, what larger system did it represent? Was it a reflection of cosmological beliefs, mapping the sky onto the earth? Or did it encode social relationships, territorial identity, or seasonal cycles tied to agricultural life? Each interpretation offers partial clarity, yet none fully resolves the complexity of the system as a whole. Some more speculative perspectives suggest that long barrows like West Kennet may have functioned not only as tombs, but as memory machines, architectural systems designed to preserve oral histories, genealogies, and cultural identity across generations. In this view, the physical arrangement of bones, chambers, and passages may have encoded symbolic meanings that are no longer readable without the cultural context that once gave them coherence. While such ideas remain outside mainstream consensus, they highlight the possibility that these structures carried layers of meaning beyond burial alone. There is also the question of sensory experience. What did it feel like to enter this space in the Neolithic world, illuminated only by firelight or torch flame? The narrow passage would have required careful movement. The chambers, enclosed by heavy stone, would have amplified sound and confined perception. Was this environment designed to evoke reverence, fear, transformation, or reflection? Or was the experience of entering and exiting the tomb part of a ritual cycle that reinforced communal identity and connection to ancestry? And yet, despite all analysis, the purpose of certain architectural choices remains elusive. Why does the structure extend so deeply into the hillside, rather than standing fully exposed? Why were multiple chambers arranged along a single axis? Why were some individuals buried while others were not? Each answer seems to generate new questions, as if the structure was designed to resist final interpretation. Over time, West Kennet Long Barrow ceased to function as an active burial site, but it did not lose significance. Later prehistoric communities and even modern visitors have continued to engage with it in various ways, sometimes as a place of heritage, sometimes as a focus of ritual reinterpretation. Its presence has never fully faded from human awareness, even as its original meaning has become increasingly distant. Today, standing at its entrance, one is met not by answers, but by silence. The passage leads inward, but what it once fully meant remains partially out of reach. The bones have long since been studied, the structure carefully mapped, yet the intention behind its creation continues to elude complete understanding. And so the question lingers in the still air of the Wiltshire Hills. Was West Kennet Long Barrow simply a communal tomb shaped by practical and ritual necessity, or does it represent a deeper architectural language, one that encoded memory, identity, and belief in ways we are only beginning to recognize? What else might still lie hidden beneath its stones, not physically but conceptually, waiting for a way of understanding that has yet to be rediscovered? From the rolling chalk hills of Wiltshire and the ancient passageways of West Kennet Long Barrow, where generations of Neolithic people engaged in ritualized acts of memory and burial, our journey now moves across an ocean to the wide, fertile floodplains of the Mississippi River in what is today Illinois. Here, the landscape shifts dramatically from the soft greens of England to broad, flat terraces, punctuated by the remnants of an entirely different kind of civilization. A city built not of stone, but of earth, and whose scale and sophistication continue to astonish archaeologists and historians alike. This is Cahokia Mounds, the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico, a monumental testament to the ingenuity, ambition, and social complexity of the Mississippian culture. Spanning over 6 square miles at its peak around 1050 to 1200 AD, Cahokia was home to tens of thousands of people, perhaps as many as 20,000, living in a carefully organized urban center dominated by earthen mounds rising dramatically from the surrounding plain. Unlike stone monuments of Europe or the Near East, these mounds were sculpted from soil, compacted layer by layer, reflecting extraordinary engineering skill and coordinated labor. The largest of these mounds, Monk's Mound, stretches over 1,000 feet at its base and rises nearly 100 feet high, forming a platform so massive that it seems almost unnatural within the flat river landscape. Its sheer size hints at a society capable of organizing immense labor forces over generations. Each level, each terrace, each angle appears deliberate, pointing toward celestial events, aligning with nearby plazas, or perhaps emphasizing hierarchies of power and ritual within the city. Standing near its base today, it is almost impossible to imagine the thousands of people whose combined effort built this enormous structure, layer by layer, over decades or even centuries. Cahokia is not simply a collection of mounds. It is an entire urban ecosystem. Archaeologists have identified over 120 mounds scattered across the site, each serving a specific function, some as burial platforms, others as ceremonial spaces, elite residences, or markers of social and spiritual power. The site's central plaza, one of the largest open spaces of its time in North America, could accommodate thousands during seasonal gatherings or rituals. The scale of Cahokia challenges conventional assumptions about pre-Columbian societies north of Mexico, forcing a re-evaluation of urbanism, trade, and social organization in ancient North America. Yet even with decades of study, Cahokia retains its mysteries. For instance, the layout of the city suggests a highly ordered design, with evidence of astronomical and cosmological planning. Certain mounds align with solstices, equinoxes, or cardinal directions, indicating an awareness of celestial cycles that structured ceremonial life. Was this purely religious, intended to harmonize human activity with the cosmos? Or did these alignments serve a practical function, coordinating agricultural and social calendars across a sprawling population? Perhaps it was both, blending spiritual symbolism with societal organization. Burials within Cahokia provide equally tantalizing enigmas. Some mounds contain the remains of elite individuals, interred with elaborate artifacts, engraved shell beads, copper ornaments, ceremonial pottery. Others show evidence of ritualized sacrifice, including human and animal offerings, sometimes in dramatic and violent forms. What motivated these acts? Were they intended to reinforce social hierarchy, appease spiritual forces, or ensure agricultural fertility? And why do these practices appear concentrated at particular mounds, suggesting a stratified religious or political system rather than uniform communal ritual? The mystery deepens when we examine the broader environmental and social context. Cahokia thrived in the rich floodplains of the Mississippi, yet the city was vulnerable to seasonal flooding, resource depletion, and social stress. Around 1250 AD, signs emerge of population decline, abandonment of mounds, and reorganization of settlements. Archaeologists debate the causes: climate change, deforestation, social upheaval, disease, or internal political conflict may have contributed. Yet no single explanation fully accounts for the rapid rise and fall of a city that rivaled contemporary European urban centers in scale and complexity. Equally compelling are the questions of construction technique. How did a pre-industrial society move and shape such massive quantities of earth without metal tools or draft animals? Some mounds contain tens of thousands of cubic meters of soil, transported in baskets over great distances. The precision in leveling terraces, shaping corners, and integrating mounds into the natural landscape suggests a sophisticated understanding of engineering and spatial planning. Did Cahokian builders employ measurement systems, ritualized labor organization, or unwritten architectural knowledge passed orally through generations? The physical evidence hints at extraordinary skill, yet the methods remain largely speculative. Further mysteries lie in the social and political structure of Cahokia. Excavation reveals complex neighborhoods, differentiated by status, occupation, and perhaps clan affiliation. Evidence of long-distance trade: copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, mica from the Appalachians, suggests a network of exchange and influence extending across much of North America. How was such a network maintained? How did leaders consolidate authority over thousands of residents in a city without written language? The answers remain elusive, leaving only traces of a sophisticated, centralized society whose inner workings are partially hidden in the archaeological record. Cahokia also challenges our understanding of cultural memory. Unlike monumental stone cities elsewhere, its earthen structures are more susceptible to erosion, decay, and transformation. Yet despite the passage of centuries, the mounds persist, shaping the landscape and continuing to draw human attention. In many ways, the site functions as a bridge between past and present, connecting modern observers with the knowledge, rituals, and aspirations of a civilization long vanished. What did the people of Cahokia see when they looked across their plaza toward Monk's Mound? What ceremonies unfolded there, and how did they experience the rhythms of life within this complex city? And then there is the symbolic dimension of the mounds themselves. Unlike a tomb, a temple, or a palace, these earthen structures occupy multiple roles simultaneously. They are burial sites, ceremonial platforms, visual markers, and perhaps even cosmological instruments, all layered with meaning and intention. Each mound tells a story, but the complete narrative, the one that would have been understood intuitively by Cahokia's inhabitants, is now partially obscured by time, leaving only fragments of understanding for modern observers to piece together. Today, as we walk among the remaining mounds, the city's scale and complexity are difficult to comprehend. The enormity of what was achieved with basic materials, the coordination of labor, the integration of ritual, politics, and astronomy, these elements inspire awe. Yet much remains unexplained. The motivations behind elite burials, the precise functions of ceremonial spaces, the mechanisms of social control, and the reasons for the city's eventual decline. Cahokia endures not as a closed story, but as an open question. It invites us to contemplate human ambition, the shaping of landscapes, and the interplay between society and the cosmos. It stands as a reminder that even in a land seemingly distant from the great civilizations of Eurasia, ancient people created centers of extraordinary power and mystery, places whose full meaning remains just out of reach. And so we are left to wonder, what secrets of urban design, cosmology, and ritual might still be hidden beneath these massive earthen mounds? How did a society without written language orchestrate such complexity? And what traces of their understanding of the world survive in the silent contours of the landscape? The questions linger, echoing across the centuries, waiting for further discovery. From the monumental earthworks of Cahokia, where human hands shaped the Mississippi floodplain into platforms of ritual, power, and memory, our journey now turns across continents and millennia to the vast plains of the Indus River in what is today Pakistan. Here lies a city that has long puzzled archaeologists and historians alike, not for its size alone, but for the precision, sophistication, and enigmatic silence it embodies. This is Harappa, one of the earliest and most advanced urban centers of the Indus Valley civilization, thriving around 2600 to 1900 BC. At first sight, Harappa presents as a mosaic of low mounds, scattered over the flat plains, rising gently from the earth in muted, earthen tones. These mounds, remnants of houses, granaries, streets, and walls, hint at a city once alive with movement, commerce, and communal activity. Unlike the monumental stone cities of Mesopotamia or Egypt, Harappa was built of baked brick, arranged in precise grid patterns. Streets intersect at right angles, creating orderly blocks, while sophisticated drainage systems carry waste and water with remarkable efficiency. In a world where urban planning was still in its infancy, Harappa exhibits a striking clarity of design, one that suggests not only technical knowledge, but an underlying cultural logic that remains elusive to us today. Much of what we know comes from archaeological excavations conducted over the past century. Entire streets, workshops, and marketplaces have been uncovered, alongside standardized bricks, weights, and measures. This consistency across the city implies centralized regulation, a form of governance we understand only in part. Who orchestrated such a society? What forms of authority or shared belief allowed thousands of people to live within this structured urban framework, to build monumental walls, and to maintain public sanitation systems that rivaled modern standards? One of the most compelling enigmas of Harappa lies in its apparent absence of overt religious or monumental iconography. Unlike contemporary civilizations in Mesopotamia or Egypt, no palaces, temples, or royal tombs dominate the cityscape. Instead, the focus appears to be on functional urban infrastructure, storage, streets, baths, and water management. And yet, small terracotta figurines, inscribed seals, and symbolic artifacts hint at a spiritual or ritual dimension that remains tantalizingly obscure. What did these symbols signify, and how were they integrated into daily life? Were their spiritual practices entirely divorced from monumental architecture, or have they simply not survived the ravages of time? Another enduring mystery lies in the Indus script, etched onto thousands of seals and tablets across Harappa. Though these inscriptions are short, highly standardized, and repeated across the region, they resist translation. No bilingual texts have been found, leaving the language of Harappa tantalizingly out of reach. Were these symbols administrative markers, religious icons, or a form of record-keeping we cannot yet comprehend? The absence of deciphered writing obscures the inner life of the city, leaving us to interpret the society primarily through material remains. The organization of the city itself raises further questions. Residential areas appear stratified. Larger, more robust houses suggest the presence of wealth or social standing, while smaller dwellings indicate more modest households. Yet there are few signs of extreme inequality. Could Harappa have represented a society structured less by hierarchy and more by coordination, cooperation, and communal oversight? Or is this impression deceiving, with social divisions hidden in ways that leave few traces for archaeologists to discover? Trade and connectivity deepen the puzzle. Harappa was part of a sprawling network of Indus Valley cities, including Mohenjo-Daro and Dholavira, linked by rivers and overland routes. Artifacts indicate long-distance trade: carnelian beads from Gujarat, shells from the Arabian Sea, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. What systems of commerce, negotiation, and authority facilitated such widespread exchange in a civilization without deciphered writing? How did knowledge, culture, and technology flow across this network, and what societal mechanisms sustained it over centuries? Despite its achievements, Harappa eventually experienced decline. By around 1900 BC, the city was abandoned or partially depopulated, its streets falling silent. Archaeologists suggest multiple contributing factors: climate change, river course shifts, resource depletion, or social reorganization. Yet, as with the rise of the city, no single explanation fully accounts for its decline. How could a civilization capable of such sophisticated urban planning, sanitation, and trade dissolve, leaving only mounds and fragments to testify to its former brilliance? The artifacts themselves offer glimpses into everyday life, yet also provoke new questions. Tiny figurines suggest religious or ritual significance, but their exact meaning is unknown. Standardized weights and measures imply commercial regulation, yet the mechanisms of enforcement remain invisible. The city's baths and granaries reveal attention to hygiene and food security, yet the larger social or spiritual worldview that shaped these choices is lost. Each discovery simultaneously illuminates and deepens the mystery, revealing a civilization both familiar and profoundly alien. Harappa challenges us to reconsider what a city can be. It was a place of order without monumental dominance, a society of precision without overt hierarchy, and a culture whose intellectual and spiritual frameworks remain partly hidden. How did its people conceive of power, religion, and community? What principles guided their urban planning, trade, and daily life? And what knowledge has been lost to the centuries, buried beneath layers of soil and memory? Standing today among the remnants of its streets and mounds, one cannot help but sense both the ambition and fragility of human civilization. Harappa endures as a monument to ingenuity, coordination, and mystery. Its layout, artifacts, and inscriptions invite contemplation, but the full meaning remains tantalizingly out of reach. And so the questions linger. What truly governed life in Harappa? How were its people connected to each other, to their environment, and to unseen spiritual or societal forces? What remains hidden beneath the earth, waiting for discovery or understanding? In seeking answers, we encounter not only the traces of a long-lost city, but also the enduring challenge of interpreting human ingenuity across the millennia. From the bustling streets and orderly grids of Harappa, where urban planning and communal life reached an astonishing level of sophistication, our journey now follows the currents of trade and water, moving southwest toward the Arabian Sea. Here, at the edge of the Indus Valley, lies a settlement whose significance extends beyond its walls, streets, and houses. A city whose very location speaks to a civilization attuned not only to the rhythms of human life, but to the ceaseless flow of rivers and tides. This is Lothal, a maritime hub of the Indus Valley civilization, flourishing around 2400 to 1900 BC, whose story is as much about water and commerce as it is about human ingenuity. The first impression of Lothal is deceptively modest. Low earthen mounds, the remnants of brick-lined streets and structures, rising from the flat coastal plains of modern Gujarat. Yet beneath this unassuming surface lies a city whose achievements rival those of its northern counterparts, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Lothal was not merely a town of dwellings and workshops. It was a carefully planned port, integrating residential areas, warehouses, and, most astonishingly, what appears to be the world's earliest known dock. This dock, precisely constructed and ingeniously aligned with tidal movements, allowed ships to enter, unload, and depart with a remarkable efficiency, demonstrating a level of maritime engineering that seems almost inconceivable for its era. Archaeologists have revealed the dock's meticulous design, a basin lined with kiln-fired bricks, equipped with channels to regulate water levels, connected to the broader river system that flowed into the Arabian Sea. Its presence suggests that Lothal was more than a local trade center. It was a node in a far-reaching network of exchange, linking the interior of the Indus Valley with distant lands across the coast. What goods flowed through this harbor? Carnelian beads, semi-precious stones, ivory, shells, and perhaps even exotic metals and textiles. How were these complex trading operations coordinated? What knowledge guided the construction of the dock to account for tides, sedimentation, and river shifts? The precision hints at both empirical observation and accumulated communal knowledge, yet the full story remains partially hidden. Beyond its harbor, Lothal reveals an extraordinary attention to craft, measurement, and standardization. Workshops uncovered in excavations demonstrate specialized industries: bead making, bead carving, shell inlay, and metallurgy. Artifacts show uniformity in weights, measures, and dimensions, indicating rigorous control and perhaps even regulation across a vast commercial network. Could such standardization reflect early forms of economic governance? Did Lothal's leaders or merchants enforce these measures, or were they maintained by convention and tradition? The answer remains elusive, encoded only in the artifacts themselves. The city's layout complements this sophistication. Streets intersect at right angles, residential areas are carefully planned, and large open spaces suggest communal or administrative functions. Yet, as in Harappa, there are few monumental religious structures. Instead, smaller shrines, ritual baths, and symbolic artifacts hint at spiritual life integrated into the domestic and commercial sphere. Were these spaces intended for private devotion, communal rites, or both? Did spiritual observance guide commercial activity, or did it operate independently? Lothal's subtlety challenges our expectations of what constitutes religious and civic architecture. One of the most perplexing aspects of Lothal is its relationship with water. Situated near a tidal estuary, the city faced both opportunity and risk. Flooding, sediment deposition, and shifting channels would have required constant vigilance and maintenance. Yet the builders of Lothal managed these forces with ingenuity. Engineered embankments, drainage systems, and the carefully crafted dock allowed the city to thrive. How did the inhabitants acquire such knowledge of hydrology? Was it empirical, trial and error learning passed over generations, or guided by observation intertwined with spiritual or ritual understanding of rivers and tides? Trade also raises profound questions. Lothal's beads and artifacts have been found across the Indian subcontinent and even in regions as far as Mesopotamia, hinting at long-distance connections that spanned hundreds, perhaps thousands of miles. What forms of communication, record-keeping, and negotiation supported such networks? Without deciphered writing, we can only imagine a society skilled in symbols, memory, and oral knowledge, capable of managing logistics across vast distances with remarkable efficiency. Yet despite its achievements, Lothal eventually declined. By around 1900 BC, the city shows signs of abandonment, its docks silted, workshops silent, streets deserted. Scholars speculate on the causes: changes in river courses, rising sea levels, environmental degradation, or shifts in trade routes may have contributed. But no single factor explains the sudden quiet of a city that once hummed with craft, commerce, and maritime activity. What combination of natural forces, social decisions, and historical contingencies led to its decline? Artifacts themselves hint at a civilization both familiar and mysterious. Terracotta figurines, seals, and beads speak to human creativity and ritual, yet the meanings of many symbols remain indecipherable. The precision of weights, the standardization of bricks, and the sophistication of the dock all speak to knowledge carefully transmitted across generations, yet the rationale behind certain choices, placement of workshops, alignment of streets, or orientation of the harbor, remains obscure. Walking among Lothal's remains today, one senses both the ambition and the fragility of human endeavor. Here, a people mastered land and water, crafted intricate objects, and participated in vast trade networks, yet so much of their life and knowledge is lost, leaving only traces in earth, brick, and artifact. And so we are left with questions that endure as vividly as the sun-baked bricks themselves. How did Lothal's inhabitants harmonize urban planning, maritime engineering, and social coordination? What did the ebb and flow of rivers mean to them, both practically and spiritually? How did this city, so vibrant and capable, vanish almost without a trace, leaving the dock, the beads, and the streets to whisper across millennia? The mysteries of Lothal remain, inviting us to imagine the rhythms of life in a city that once bridged rivers, seas, and human ambition. From the tidal rhythms and engineered waters of Lothal, where ancient merchants once navigated the meeting point of river and sea with remarkable precision, our journey now rises into a dramatically different landscape, one shaped not by coastal plains, but by the vast altitude of the Andes. The air grows thinner in imagination alone as we travel upward across continents, toward a plateau that seems to hover between earth and sky, where stone structures emerge from the highland soil like remnants of a forgotten world order. Here, near the shores of Lake Titicaca in modern-day Bolivia, stands one of the most enigmatic ceremonial centers of the ancient Andes, Akapana Pyramid, part of the larger sacred complex of Tiwanaku. Rising in stepped terraces from the Altiplano, the Akapana is not a pyramid in the familiar Egyptian sense, but a vast, terraced earth and stone structure, engineered with precision that continues to challenge conventional understanding of pre-Columbian engineering. At first sight, the Akapana appears as a massive, truncated mound, its form eroded by centuries of wind, rain, and seismic activity. Yet closer observation reveals intention in its construction. The structure is aligned with cardinal directions, its 7-stepped platforms forming a geometric ascent toward a flattened summit. Retaining walls composed of precisely cut andesite blocks once supported these terraces, while internal channels and drainage systems suggest an advanced understanding of hydrology at extreme altitude. Water was not merely managed here, it was choreographed, guided through stone-lined conduits in a way that suggests ritual and engineering were deeply intertwined. Archaeological studies indicate that the Akapana was constructed and modified over several centuries, likely between 500 and 1000 AD, during the height of the Tiwanaku civilization. At its peak, Tiwanaku was not a marginal settlement, but a major ceremonial and political center influencing vast regions of the southern Andes. The Akapana stood at its heart, possibly serving as a sacred mountain reimagined in architectural form, a constructed axis between the earthly realm and the celestial sky. Yet even with decades of excavation and analysis, the pyramid resists simple explanation. One of its most striking features is its internal water system. Beneath the terraces lies a complex network of channels, reservoirs, and stone drains that appear to have been designed not merely for utility, but for controlled flow and display. Some researchers suggest that water may have been intentionally moved through the structure during ritual events, creating visual and auditory effects, flowing streams emerging from stone, cascading through terraces, and disappearing into hidden drains. What purpose did this serve? Was it symbolic purification, a representation of cosmic rivers, or an embodiment of agricultural fertility myths central to Andean cosmology? The precision of this hydraulic system raises further questions. At such high altitude, where rainfall patterns are seasonal and environmental conditions harsh, the engineering required to manage water effectively would have demanded both empirical observation and deep environmental knowledge. How was this knowledge acquired and transmitted? Was it centralized within an elite class of engineers and priests, or distributed through communal practice and long-term experimentation? Then there is the question of function. Mainstream interpretations suggest that the Akapana pyramid served as a ceremonial platform, possibly used for ritual gatherings, offerings, and elite processions. Excavations have revealed evidence of feasting, animal remains, and ceremonial artifacts, hinting at large-scale communal events. Some burials discovered within or near the structure suggest that it may also have held funerary significance, perhaps linking ancestral reverence with state power. But even within this framework, ambiguity persists. Why build such an immense structure in a region where resources were limited by altitude and climate? The labor required to transport massive stone blocks from distant quarries across the Andean plateau would have been extraordinary. What social organization enabled such coordination? Was labor voluntary, ritualized, or enforced through political authority? And what belief system justified the enormous investment of energy required to reshape an entire landscape into a stepped sacred mountain? The symbolic interpretation of the Akapana as a constructed mountain is particularly compelling in Andean cosmology, where mountains, apus, are often regarded as living spiritual entities. In this view, the pyramid may have been designed to emulate or even contain the essence of a sacred peak, allowing ritual interaction with forces associated with water, fertility, and celestial order. But was this imitation of nature purely symbolic, or did it reflect a belief that human construction could actively participate in shaping cosmic balance? Some more speculative perspectives suggest that the Akapana may encode astronomical or calendrical knowledge within its geometry. The alignment of terraces, sight lines from the summit, and orientation of drainage channels have led to hypotheses that the structure may have functioned as a kind of ritual calendar, marking seasonal cycles or solar events. While these interpretations remain debated, they raise intriguing possibilities about the integration of architecture, environment, and timekeeping in Tiwanaku society. Even the material composition of the pyramid invites reflection. The finely cut andesite blocks used in key structural areas were quarried from distant sources, transported across challenging terrain, and fitted with remarkable precision. The craftsmanship suggests specialized knowledge of stoneworking techniques that remain only partially understood. How were such heavy materials shaped and moved without wheeled transport or draft animals in the high-altitude environment? What systems of organization, belief, or social obligation made such feats possible? Over time, the Akapana appears to have undergone multiple phases of construction, destruction, and reconstruction. Some layers show evidence of intentional dismantling or collapse, while others indicate rebuilding efforts that incorporated earlier structures into new designs. This cyclical transformation suggests that the pyramid was not static, but part of an evolving ritual and political landscape. What events prompted these changes? Shifts in leadership, environmental stress, or ideological transformation? By around 1000 AD, the Tiwanaku civilization began to decline. The reasons remain debated. Prolonged droughts, environmental change, internal social fragmentation, or shifts in trade and political networks may all have played roles. As centralized authority weakened, monumental centers like Akapana were gradually abandoned. Yet even in abandonment, the structure remained, its terraces still rising from the plateau, its drainage channels still carved into stone, its symbolic presence intact. Today, standing before the Akapana pyramid, one is struck not only by its scale, but by its ambiguity. It is clearly a product of intention, engineering, and cultural meaning, but the full framework of that meaning remains partially obscured. The structure resists a single interpretation. It is at once a temple, a mountain, a hydraulic system, and perhaps something more, something that integrated environment, belief, and social order into a unified architectural form. And so the questions persist, echoing across the high plains of the Andes. What vision of the world led to the creation of Akapana? How did the people of Tiwanaku understand the relationship between water, stone, sky, and human society? And what parts of that understanding have been lost, buried beneath centuries of erosion and silence, still waiting within the terraces of this enigmatic pyramid? As the winds carry us away from the high altitudes and monumental stones of the Tiwanaku Akapana pyramid, we journey northward once more, tracing the currents of human expression etched into the very rock of the earth itself. From engineered pyramids to the delicate strokes of prehistoric hands, our path now leads us to a landscape where stone becomes canvas and time becomes layered in silence. Here, on the rugged plateaus of Azerbaijan, lies Gobustan, a region where human history has been preserved not in buildings or fortifications, but in petroglyphs, enigmatic images carved into rock that have endured for thousands of years. The terrain of Gobustan is dramatic. Jagged cliffs rise from the semi-arid landscape, strewn with boulders that glint in the harsh sunlight. The plateaus themselves are weathered, their surfaces smoothed by millennia of wind and rain, yet punctuated by grooves, depressions, and carvings that speak to a long and intimate human presence. Here, across some 200 square kilometers, are more than 6,000 rock engravings, petroglyphs that span from approximately 5000 BC to as late as the Middle Ages. Each panel, each line etched into stone, is a silent testament to the lives, beliefs, and imaginations of those who came before us. At first glance, the images appear simple. Hunters raising spears, herds of animals traversing plains, boats floating on unseen rivers, and human figures dancing or performing ritual gestures. Yet their simplicity is deceptive. The motifs vary greatly in style and complexity, reflecting changes over millennia. Some are geometric, abstract patterns that defy immediate understanding. Others are vividly naturalistic depictions of ibex, horses, and deer, suggesting both keen observation and symbolic significance. What was the intention behind these images? Were they purely narrative, recording daily life and survival, or were they imbued with spiritual or astronomical significance? The context of Gobustan is crucial. This area was once far wetter than it is today, with rivers and streams supporting diverse ecosystems that no longer exist. The petroglyphs depict animals and landscapes that hint at environmental changes across thousands of years. They also reveal evidence of early social and ritual life, scenes that suggest communal gatherings, hunting strategies, and perhaps shamanistic practices. Were these images meant as educational tools for younger generations, or did they serve as sacred markers within a larger cosmology? One of the most fascinating aspects of Gobustan is the prevalence of marine imagery. Boats, sometimes drawn with remarkable detail, appear frequently alongside terrestrial motifs. This is particularly intriguing given the distance to the Caspian Sea, suggesting that watercraft and riverine travel played an essential role in the lives of these communities. Could these carvings also represent journeys not just physical but spiritual, a form of narrative that bridges the terrestrial and the metaphysical? Scholars have long debated the symbolic significance of certain repeated motifs: spirals, concentric circles, handprints, and anthropomorphic figures with exaggerated features. Are these the earliest attempts at proto-writing, or are they purely ritualistic symbols whose meaning has been lost over time? Some researchers propose that the petroglyphs encode celestial knowledge, tracking the cycles of the sun, moon, or seasons. Others suggest that they were talismanic, protective images carved to secure hunting success, fertility, or safe passage. Yet none of these interpretations can be verified conclusively, leaving a sense of mystery that resonates even today. Technically, the craftsmanship is equally remarkable. The artists of Gobustan carved into solid rock using stone tools with varying depths, textures, and levels of precision. Some figures are etched lightly, almost delicately, while others are deeply incised, their permanence a deliberate statement. What drove these choices? Were certain techniques reserved for sacred or particularly meaningful images? And how did these people conceptualize permanence, knowing that their work would survive thousands of years beyond their own lives? There is also the spatial arrangement to consider. Many petroglyphs appear in clusters on prominent rock faces, but some are hidden in crevices or on vertical cliffs, accessible only to those who dared to climb or navigate treacherous terrain. Did the placement itself carry significance, perhaps reflecting social hierarchy, spiritual access, or cosmological alignment? Could some images have been intended to be seen only by the initiated, their meaning secret or esoteric? Over the centuries, the region of Gobustan has been shaped not just by human hands, but by the natural forces of wind, rain, and seismic activity. Yet the petroglyphs endure, their clarity often astonishing given the harsh environmental conditions. These enduring carvings invite us to ask, what motivated their creators to leave such a permanent mark? Were they seeking connection with the divine, asserting territorial presence, or simply expressing the intrinsic human need to communicate across time? As modern viewers, we may project our own interpretations onto these ancient images, but Gobustan resists full comprehension. The rock art does not yield a single narrative or tidy explanation. Instead, it offers a window into an ancient world where survival, ritual, observation, and imagination intertwined. Each line etched into stone raises questions rather than answers them, opening space for wonder and speculation about the complex lives of those who once roamed these plateaus. And so, as we trace the grooves and curves of Gobustan's petroglyphs, we are reminded that history is not merely a catalogue of dates and events, but a tapestry woven from human intention, creativity, and mystery. Who were the artists who carved these images? What did they hope to communicate across the centuries? And what secrets, still etched into stone, await discovery beyond what our eyes can see today? In these questions lies the enduring power of Gobustan, a silent, unyielding testament to the mysterious interplay of humanity, environment, and belief. As the echoes of Gobustan's ancient carvings fade behind us, we turn our attention westward, to a land where rivers weave through dense forests and fertile floodplains, giving rise to one of Mesoamerica's earliest and most enigmatic civilizations. Here, nestled along the banks of the Coatzacoalcos River in present-day Mexico, lies San Lorenzo Tenochtitlán, a site that challenges our understanding of early urban development, artistic expression, and ritual practice. Unlike the sprawling stone cities of later Mesoamerica, San Lorenzo is a city built not merely of dwellings, but of earth, clay, and carefully positioned colossal monuments, each element deliberately placed to convey power, identity, and perhaps a secret knowledge now lost to time. Walking through its reconstructed terraces and mounds, one cannot help but notice the extraordinary scale and craftsmanship of the site. San Lorenzo's creators, flourishing around 1200 to 900 BC, shaped the landscape into raised platforms, ceremonial plazas, and residential compounds. From above, the city might have appeared like a living mosaic, a carefully orchestrated interplay of geometry and environment. Yet, much of what we see today is a fragment of its former glory. Centuries of erosion, flooding, and human activity have obscured the original plan, leaving archaeologists to piece together the puzzle with painstaking care. Central to San Lorenzo's enduring fascination are its colossal stone heads, some weighing several tons, each carved from single blocks of basalt transported over many kilometers. The sheer scale of these sculptures, some reaching over 3 meters in height, raises immediate questions. How were these massive stones moved across dense jungle and riverine terrain? How did a civilization, predating complex wheeled vehicles or draft animals in the region, manage such feats of engineering? Beyond the logistics lies the enigma of their purpose. Were these heads rulers immortalized in stone, gods made tangible, or symbolic guardians of the city's spiritual core? Their expressions are simultaneously serene and formidable, a tension that invites contemplation on the role of leadership, ritual, and ancestral veneration in early Olmec society. Yet San Lorenzo is more than its colossal sculptures. Beneath the monumental facades lie networks of drainage channels, terraces, and clay platforms, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of hydrology and urban planning. This was a city designed to withstand floods, to organize space with social and ceremonial hierarchy in mind, and perhaps to mirror the natural and cosmological order itself. Such innovations prompt us to ask, how did this knowledge develop? And was it a product of trial and error, divine inspiration, or the transmission of wisdom from even older, now forgotten cultures? The artistry of San Lorenzo extends beyond sheer size to intricate detail. Mask-like faces appear on thrones, stelae, and altars, often depicting supernatural beings or composite creatures that blend human and jaguar features. These motifs suggest a cosmology rich in symbolism, a narrative that linked human existence with animal power, natural cycles, and spiritual realms. Some scholars propose that these figures represent shamanic visions or mythological beings, while others argue they might encode political messages or ancestral claims to authority. Yet no definitive interpretation has emerged, leaving the city's true meaning tantalizingly out of reach. Archaeological excavations reveal further mysteries. Beneath the mounds, caches of jade, obsidian, and pottery have been discovered, sometimes deliberately broken or arranged in precise patterns. Were these offerings, protective rituals, or part of a larger ceremonial system that we cannot fully reconstruct? Even the layout of the city hints at knowledge of astronomy. Certain alignments of platforms and plazas correspond to solar and lunar cycles, perhaps integrating celestial observation into civic and religious life. Could the entire city have functioned as a living calendar, orchestrating human activity in harmony with cosmic rhythms? San Lorenzo also challenges our understanding of social organization. The coordination required to transport massive stones, carve detailed sculptures, and maintain urban infrastructure implies a centralized authority with both logistical skill and spiritual legitimacy. But how was such authority maintained without writing systems comparable to later civilizations? Did ritual, oral tradition, and the monumental landscape itself serve as tools of governance and cohesion? The absence of written records leaves these questions open, allowing the stones themselves to speak in silent, enigmatic ways. As we move from mound to mound, the interplay of scale and intimacy becomes apparent. The colossal heads dominate the skyline, yet smaller figurines, intricate carvings, and subtle modifications of the terrain reveal attention to daily life, personal identity, and community. San Lorenzo was not merely a ceremonial center, it was a lived space, a place where the extraordinary and the mundane coexisted, and where the human desire to leave a lasting mark on the world found expression in stone, earth, and ritual. And yet, for all its achievements, San Lorenzo remains a riddle. Why did this urban experiment decline around 900 BC? Was it environmental stress, social upheaval, or external pressure from neighboring communities? What knowledge, encoded in stone and clay, vanished with its abandonment? As we stand amidst the terraces, the heads, and the silent plazas, we confront the realization that the city's mysteries are far from solved. In the shadows of San Lorenzo Tenochtitlán, the past lingers not as a static record, but as a conversation across millennia. Who were the people who shaped this city with vision and determination? What drove them to create monuments of such scale and precision? And perhaps most provocatively, what secrets, inscribed in stone yet undeciphered, still await discovery beneath the earth and within the silence of this ancient landscape? In pondering these questions, we are reminded that the legacy of San Lorenzo is not merely what survives in artifacts or ruins, but the enduring human impulse to seek, to create, and to leave a mark on the world that transcends time. From the monumental stone heads and earthen terraces of San Lorenzo Tenochtitlán, where early Mesoamerican civilization first revealed its capacity for scale, symbolism, and authority, our journey continues deeper into the highlands of Central America. The dense jungle begins to rise again, wrapping itself around volcanic ridges and mist-laced valleys, where time feels layered rather than linear. Here, in the western highlands of modern Guatemala, lies a site that quietly bridges two great worlds of ancient Mesoamerican history, the Olmec horizon and the rise of the Maya. This is Takalik Abaj, a place whose very name, Standing Stone, speaks to its enduring presence in a landscape shaped by both natural force and human intention. Unlike the purely ceremonial centers or later Maya city-states, Takalik Abaj is a transitional world. It is where cultural identities overlap, where artistic traditions shift, and where the boundaries between civilizations blur into something more complex than a simple historical sequence. Spread across terraced slopes and volcanic ridges, the site reveals a carefully structured environment. Stone monuments emerge from the earth at unexpected angles, some weathered almost beyond recognition, others still bearing the carved traces of ancient hands. Stelae stand like silent witnesses to centuries of ritual activity, while carved altars and sculptures suggest a place where political authority and spiritual belief were inseparable. Yet, despite decades of study, the full story of Takalik Abaj resists clarity, as if the site itself is layered with competing narratives that never fully resolve into a single interpretation. Archaeologically, Takalik Abaj is known for its extraordinary continuity of occupation, stretching from at least 1000 BC through the early centuries AD. It is one of the few known sites where Olmec-style monumental art and early Maya inscriptions coexist in the same cultural space. This overlap raises profound questions about identity and influence in ancient Mesoamerica. Did Olmec traditions fade and give way to Maya innovations, or did they merge, transform, and persist in ways we are only beginning to understand? Among the most compelling features of the site are its colossal sculptural works and carved monuments. Some bear unmistakable Olmec stylistic traits: broad facial features, downturned mouths, and powerful, almost abstract expressions. Others reflect emerging Maya aesthetics, with more detailed iconography and early hieroglyphic elements. This coexistence of styles suggests not a simple replacement of cultures, but a period of interaction, adaptation, and perhaps even shared authority. What kind of society produced such hybrid artistic expression? Was Takalik Abaj a meeting point of civilizations, a contested frontier, or something more integrated and fluid? The site's geography adds another layer of intrigue. Positioned along ancient trade routes connecting the Pacific coast with the highlands, Takalik Abaj occupied a strategic corridor for the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultural practices. Obsidian, jade, and ceramics found at the site point to extensive regional networks. But beyond material exchange, what else moved through these routes? Did religious concepts, calendrical systems, or political ideologies travel alongside trade goods, reshaping identities across regions? One of the most striking aspects of Takalik Abaj is its ritual landscape. Monumental sculptures are not randomly placed, but carefully aligned with terraces, water sources, and natural features of the volcanic terrain. Some researchers suggest that the site may have been designed to integrate human activity with the surrounding environment in symbolic ways, turning the landscape itself into a sacred narrative. But what did that narrative represent? Was it a cosmological map, a political statement, or a reflection of ancestral memory embedded into the land itself? The monuments themselves deepen the mystery. Many are eroded, their original details softened by centuries of rain and volcanic activity. Yet even in their weathered state, they convey intention. Some stelae appear to depict rulers or elites, while others show abstract forms whose meanings remain uncertain. A few bear early examples of Maya writing, suggesting that literacy and record-keeping were beginning to emerge here. But the texts are fragmentary, their meanings still debated. What events, beliefs, or histories were being recorded in these early inscriptions? And why have so many remained undeciphered or incomplete? Burial practices at Takalik Abaj offer further clues and further questions. Tombs discovered at the site contain offerings of jade, ceramics, and obsidian blades, often arranged with deliberate care. These items suggest a belief system in which death was not an end, but a transition, possibly tied to ancestral worship or cosmological cycles. Yet the exact nature of these beliefs remains elusive. Were the dead seen as guardians, ancestors, or participants in a broader spiritual order that governed both the living and the natural world? There is also the question of transformation. Over time, Takalik Abaj appears to shift from an Olmec-influenced ceremonial center into a more distinctly Maya-oriented city. But this transition is not abrupt. Instead, it appears gradual, layered, and uneven. Some monuments were recarved or reinterpreted. Others were left in place, their meanings perhaps recontextualized by new generations. What does this say about cultural continuity in the ancient world? Was identity here something fixed, or something constantly renegotiated through ritual, art, and memory? Environmental factors may also have played a role in shaping the site's trajectory. The volcanic landscape that surrounds Takalik Abaj is both fertile and volatile. Eruptions, earthquakes, and shifting ecological conditions could have influenced settlement patterns, agricultural stability, and political organization. Yet even these natural forces do not fully explain the cultural richness and longevity of the site. Why did this place, among many others in the region, become such an enduring focal point of human activity? Today, as archaeologists continue to uncover fragments of sculpture, architecture, and inscription, Takalik Abaj resists simple categorization. It is neither purely Olmec nor fully Maya, neither entirely political nor solely ceremonial. Instead, it exists in a liminal space, a place where identities overlap and historical narratives intertwine. This ambiguity is precisely what makes it so compelling and so difficult to fully interpret. And so we are left with questions that seem to echo through the mist-covered highlands. What kind of society was capable of sustaining such cultural hybridity over centuries? How did people at Takalik Abaj understand their place within shifting political and spiritual landscapes? And what stories remain encoded in its stones, still waiting beneath erosion and time for a language we have yet to fully recover? Continuing our journey from the highlands of Takalik Abaj, where stone monuments whisper stories of cultural transition and ritual sophistication, we now travel to the Yucatan Peninsula, where the sun-baked limestone plains are punctuated by cenotes, temples, and the enduring echoes of the ancient Maya. Here lies Dzibilchaltun, a site whose very name, meaning place where there is writing on the stones, invites us to consider the interplay of language, astronomy, and ritual in the life of a civilization that has long captivated historians and travelers alike. Approaching Dzibilchaltun, the landscape immediately conveys a sense of timelessness. The flat, open plains stretch toward distant horizons, interrupted by clusters of stone structures, remnants of an urban plan that balances ceremonial, civic, and domestic spaces. In the heat of the midday sun, the buildings seem to shimmer with history, their walls etched with hieroglyphs, their stones worn smooth by centuries of wind, rain, and human touch. Each structure, whether temple, house, or palace, stands as both a physical presence and a question mark, a testament to human ingenuity and an invitation to probe deeper into the mysteries of the Maya world. The centerpiece of Dzibilchaltun is its Temple of the Seven Dolls, an enigmatic structure that has fascinated researchers for decades. Its name derives from a set of small effigies discovered within the building, but it is the temple's alignment that captures the imagination. Each year, during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the rising sun passes directly through the doorway of the temple, illuminating its inner sanctum with a golden shaft of light. This precision suggests a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, a deliberate blending of natural phenomena and human construction. Yet why was this alignment so important? Was it merely a calendrical tool, or did it serve a deeper ceremonial or cosmological purpose, linking the rhythms of the heavens to the lives of those below? Dzibilchaltun was not just a place for observation, it was a thriving city. Archaeological evidence points to continuous occupation from around 1000 BC through the post-classic period, making it one of the longest-lived settlements in the northern Yucatan. Structures of varying scale and sophistication indicate complex social hierarchies, from elite residences to common dwellings. The urban layout suggests careful planning, yet the logic behind certain alignments and clusters remains mysterious. Were these arrangements dictated by politics, religion, or an as-yet unrecognized symbolic framework that guided daily life and sacred practice? Water also defines Dzibilchaltun in unique ways. The site sits amidst a network of natural sinkholes, or cenotes, which were crucial sources of fresh water in the otherwise arid landscape. These cenotes were likely centers of ritual activity as much as practical necessity. Offerings recovered from their depths include ceramics, obsidian, jade, and even human remains, pointing to a belief system in which water served as a portal between worlds, the living and the ancestors, the temporal and the spiritual. But how did these sacred waters shape the political and religious decisions of Dzibilchaltun's inhabitants? And what untold stories lie submerged, their voices muffled by centuries of sediment? Artifacts from the site further deepen its mysteries. Pottery, tools, and sculptures reveal a culture highly skilled in craft, trade, and symbolic communication. Yet some features defy straightforward explanation. Certain carvings and motifs appear to borrow from distant Maya regions, suggesting long-distance interaction, but the nature of these connections is only partially understood. Did Dzibilchaltun act as a cultural crossroads, a center where artistic and intellectual traditions mingled, or was it a self-contained community that selectively integrated outside influences? Equally compelling are the burial sites, where complex funerary rituals hint at social stratification, cosmological belief, and reverence for ancestors. Richly adorned graves, often positioned near monumental structures, suggest that the dead were not merely interred but actively incorporated into the living landscape of Dzibilchaltun. How did these practices shape communal memory, identity, and the perpetuation of authority across generations? And to what extent did these rituals resonate with broader Maya beliefs, or represent unique local innovations? Despite decades of research, Dzibilchaltun continues to guard its secrets. Certain inscriptions remain undeciphered, and others hint at narratives that might never be fully recovered. The Temple of the Seven Dolls, while stunning in its equinoctial alignment, leaves questions unanswered about the societal and spiritual mechanisms that made such precision meaningful. What other structures or alignments have yet to be recognized? How did the city's inhabitants perceive the cosmos, their environment, and their own place within both? As we walk among the stones of Dzibilchaltun, it is impossible not to sense the layers of history pressing in from all sides. Each terrace, each doorway, each carefully positioned stone is a dialogue across time, a silent conversation between the past and the present. The site is more than an archaeological wonder. It is a living puzzle, inviting us to ask questions that are as profound as they are elusive. What drove the extraordinary synthesis of astronomy, ritual, and civic planning here? How did the people of Dzibilchaltun navigate a world defined by both human and celestial order? And what truths remain hidden, waiting for someone to decipher the full story of a city where the stones themselves seem to write? In the end, Dzibilchaltun offers a reminder that the ancient world is never fully accessible, that the traces left behind are fragments of experience, belief, and memory. And yet, in those fragments, etched in stone, aligned with the sun, and submerged in sacred water, there exists a quiet invitation to wonder, to explore, and to consider that some of history's deepest mysteries are meant not only to be studied, but to be felt, as we walk through the spaces where people once lived, worshipped, and gazed at the heavens, seeking to understand the vast and intricate cosmos in which they found themselves.